was surveyed today. The word survey is a euphemism for raid. Taxmen showed up simultaneously at the BBC's offices in Delhi and Mumbai. This is, of course, not the first time that the BBC has been surveyed. Under the UPA, taxmen landed up twice. Under Vajpayee's regime, NDA won. The BBC's books were examined once. But thus far, the surveys or the raids, call them what you want to, have yielded nothing. The courts, in fact, have on 2 occasions come to the BBC's rescue. So why under Modi's government, when there are so many precedents, why under Modi's government have the surveys, these twin surveys at 2 different locations, attracted so much controversy? Perhaps because some people allude to the timing. Just a few weeks ago, the BBC and the NDA government, along with its political swords arm, the Bharatiya Janata Party, were at each other's throats over a docu-series called India, the Modi Question. The BBC, in its documentary, implied that the film proves that Prime Minister Modi has a deep antipathy towards Muslims and has a lot to answer for in connection with the Gujarat riots of 2002. In response, of course, the Modi regime has dismissed the film as, and I quote them, hostile propaganda and anti-India garbage, unquote. For good measure, the government has even called on social media platforms to block the BBC from screening the film in India or disseminating it on the web. Viewers, were the surveys, as the opposition insists, the result of vengefulness, revenge for the negative, some people say, hit job on Modi? Now, we'll debate that a little later, viewers, in the show. But first, here's what we knew from the information that we have gleaned today. Income Tax Department sources have told Times Now that the surveys of the BBC were conducted because the IT authorities suspect tax evasion in international taxation and transfer pricing irregularities. In fact, the sources referred to alleged persistent and deliberate violation of norms and non-compliance by BBC for years. They allege that they have collected digital data and even seized the phones of BBC employees. Now here's a glimpse of what transpired today. Watch this quick report.
It's little over 10 a.m. and behind me there were several IT sleuths entering this building, knocking at BBC's door here at KG Marg in New Delhi.
The Mumbai unit has reportedly roped in other departments as well. The Income Tax Department maintains that these are not raids or searches, but the survey conducted to look into the alleged tax evasion on part of BBC.
Highly placed sources in Income Tax Department have told Times Now that BBC in India have been defiant and non-compliant to summons that have been issued earlier and diverting a significant amount of their profit. And that's the reason why these surveys are being carried out today.
It's close to 11:30 a.m. and the action has begun to unfold at the BBC office here in Mumbai. Reportedly, the income tax officials have also switched off the mobile phones of the staff members present inside the BBC office, and also the collection of their digital data has also been started with regards to the commercial purpose used for the BBC News.
This has triggered a massive political storm, with the opposition calling it as a predictable action, a sign of panic and a dictatorial move.
Well, on its part, the BBC says that they are cooperating with the IT authorities and hope that the situation is resolved soon. The BBC put out a short, succinct statement for the world to see. Now, viewers, let's for a moment focus on what the government has said in its response, and the BJP, to the claim that this entire survey reeks of vengefulness. Now, Mahua Moitra, for example, the TMC leader, said raids at BBC but VIP treatment for Adani. Congress said this is an undeclared emergency. Jairam Ramesh says must act against Adani, but government behind the BBC. And there have been several of these responses. So the Union Home Minister talked about the BBC today and felt that they are actually militantly opposed to the Prime Minister. And other BJP spokesperson viewers also came out with their guns blazing. Listen in.
यहाँ हम जेपीसी की मांग कर रहे हैं अडानी के मामले में और वहाँ सरकार बीबीसी के पीछे पड़ी हुई है. विनाशकाले विपरीत बुद्धी.
बीबीसीच्या कार्यालयावरती दिल्लीमध्ये धाड पडलेली आहे, धाड टाकलेली आहे. एखाद्या प्रसार माध्यमाच्या कार्यालयावरती धाड टाकणं हे कोणत्या लोकशाहीत बसतं? म्हणजेच काय की तुम्ही आम्ही वाटेल ते करू पण तुम्ही आवाज नाही उठवायचा. जर आवाज उठवाल तर चिरडून टाकू. ही जी एक पाशवी वृत्ती आपल्या देशामध्ये आज फोफावायला बघते ती आपण वेळेमध्ये एकत्र आलो नाही आणि आपली ताकद वाढवली नाही तर उद्या संपूर्ण देश खाऊन टाकेल.
भारतीय सत्य जो होता है इस पर 1000 कॉन्स्पिरेसी कर लो, कुछ नहीं होता है. वो करोड़ों सूर्य की भांति तेजस्वी बनकर ही बाहर आता है. ये तो मोदी जी के पीछे 2002 से कर रहे हैं और हर बार मोदी जी मजबूत होकर सच्चे बनकर और जनता की ज्यादा लोकप्रियता हासिल कर बाहर आए हैं.
अगर कुछ गलत किया नहीं है, कानून का पालन किया है, तो फिर डर कैसा? बीबीसी के अगर कृत्य देखें तो यह पूरे विश्व की सबसे भ्रष्ट बकवास कॉरपोरेशन हो गई है. और दुख की बात यह है कि बीबीसी का प्रोपेगेंडा और कांग्रेस का एजेंडा एक साथ मेल खाता है. और यह कहना गलत नहीं है. क्यों ऐसा होता है कि कांग्रेस का हाथ देश विरोधियों के साथ?
I think the opposition is acting very prematurely because they do not know the reason why. They're just putting two and two together and making it a political issue. Fact of the matter is the IT before it conducts a...
Now let's put this all in perspective for you viewers. Similar notices were sent to the BBC by the UPA and they justified the surveys then. Here are some hard facts and they're on your screens. Viewers, in 2009, IT notice was sent to the BBC related to tax reassessments from 2002-03. That was under the Vajpayee era. They were quashed by Delhi High Court in March 2016. So this all happened, these raids or notices that were sent rather, happened under the UPA. IT notice in 2010 was also sent to the BBC. Again, Congress government related to tax reassessment from 2003-04. Quashed by Delhi High Court in February 2014. Now, viewers, for decades also the opposition, especially the Congress, has been at loggerheads with the BBC for allegedly doing notoriously, as they call them, anti-India stories. Incidentally, the same accusation is being made against the BBC by the NDA, the Modi NDA today. Now, let's take you back. BBC was expelled from India during the emergency. That was in 1975. In 1970-72, BBC banned after Calcutta and Phantom India. Films caused outrage for prejudicial and negative depictions of the country. Both films were banned and BBC expelled from India till 1972. 2015, BBC's India's Daughter banned. This was in 2015, as I said, ban on commercial release of film on the 2012 Delhi gang rape. Also, 2023, BBC docuseries now has been banned. This one on Modi. So is there truth, viewers? All of this paranoia, is it? Or is there some amount of genuine misgiving based on certain facts? Now, viewers, is there truth to the claim that the BBC has a pronounced anti-India bias? Well, viewers, this is largely a matter of subjective interpretation, but let me point to some inconsistencies across sensitive issues. And I can tell you that after I explain to you these inconsistencies, even those Indians, and I have to say there are quite a majority of those Indians who tend to be a little enamored by institutions of the West and therefore tend to give them a wide berth, will perhaps admit that the BBC has employed double standards in its coverage of India. And let me walk you through some of these instances. Now, viewers, Burhan Wani, the terrorist, was referred to as a militant, driven to militancy at the age of 15 after suffering state oppression for no reason. That three words for no reason should be the ones that should be put in the quotations, because viewers, that was what was emphasized in the article that emerged. And on the other side, the BBC headline, recent headline, says how Sweden became an exporter of jihad, condemning minorities in Sweden, mostly Muslims, as jihadists, viewers. So in Sweden, Muslim immigrants, those who have settled, are jihadis, but in Kashmir, they are victims of state oppression that were forced to pick up the gun. Viewers, let's look at other examples. Let me run you by this second plate. In 2021, BBC headline, can Pak protect its religious minorities? So wide berth, the question mark is put there. Is there really a problem? Are Hindus really being killed? And if so, can they be protected? Charitable. In 2019, BBC headline read, are India's claims on minorities being persecuted in other nations true? And this was in the context of the CA law. So viewers, India is being questioned for pointing out what is a internationally well-known fact, a globally acknowledged fact, that Hindus, Sikhs, Christians, Parsis have been butchered to almost extinction in Pakistan, or even in some now instances in Bangladesh. Increasingly there are attacks on minorities there. Now look at BBC's style guide, viewers, the third instant, 1988 style guide. It refers to IRA as terrorist, viewers. The style guide, however, when it applies to India, refers to Hizbul Mujahideen and Lashkar-e-Toiba as Pak-based militant groups. So when British lives are being exterminated, the Irish Republican Army is a terrorist organization. But when unfortunately brown lives, viewers, in India are being snuffed out, Hindu lives in particular, by Islamist terror, the perpetrators are just militants. You know, some form of extremists. Now let's open this up, viewers, for some conversations. We have with us Mahesh Jethmalani. I'll just go across to him, but let me quickly introduce our other guest, Haras Rafiq, former advisor to the UK government. He has some very stern views on the BBC, and he's going to tell us a few things about how they work. Sanju Verma, Aarti Tikku, Tushar Gupta, Sanjay Jha, Ashutosh Ji, Vivek Bansal, none of these individuals require introduction, but let's go across to another individual who has sparked really the outrage in India, so to speak, against the BBC. Let's go straight across to him. Well, viewers, here we are with Mahesh Jethmalani, the Bharatiya Janata Party MP, Rajya Sabha, and someone who, of course, has targeted the BBC earlier. Now, Mr. Jethmalani, a couple of questions. Ordinarily, business such as this, that is being conducted for years altogether, would have been monitored by the IT department for a significant amount of time. Now, many people are saying that the timing here is a bit suspect, that given the fact that it has come right on the back of this BBC series, it appears that this is a knee-jerk reaction. Someone has unleashed the Rottweilers. How do you answer to this charge?
Well, I mean, you know, that's a bit of a wild statement. I don't know if it's backed up with any evidence. It's true that it's come post the BBC documentary, but the prelude to that BBC documentary and the aftermath as well was that sufficient a large amount of funding which the BBC was receiving, and it's been receiving it because it was desperate for money. It had gone almost broke, and it received a lot of funding overseas through an overseas organization called Storyworks, an entity controlled by it, from the Chinese state-owned companies such as Huawei and a host of others. Not only that, if you recall in the past, it's also out in the public domain that the employees' pension funds of the BBC, almost 150 million pounds, if not more, but at least 150 million pounds, had been invested in Huawei and other Chinese state-owned companies. So there was, this basically was put a cloud over the BBC's motivations behind releasing of that documentary, particularly since the BBC documentary had ignored the fact, it was arrogant enough to attribute itself as the repository of truth when the Supreme Court had made a searching inquiry, right? And before that, an SIT investigation team had scrutinized the entire evidence relating to the Gujarat riots, and particularly the role of Prime Minister or then Chief Minister Modi in the matter, and had given him a clean chit. So if anybody is suspect in this, it's the BBC. And because of the overseas Chinese funding and Chinese investments by the BBC of pension funds in Chinese state-owned entities, obviously the BBC has come under financial scrutiny. That how are its activities in India being funded? All right. Now I don't know what the basis is. I mean, I have no idea as to why IT has opened up what they call a survey. They've initiated a survey. Right?
Okay, but typically,
which is a pretty comprehensive search into BBC's activities here, right?
Okay, yes. But typically, this is more on transfer pricing and tax evasion across jurisdictions, geographies. Now, clearly,
yes,
this would have been monitored for a significant amount of time, as I said. And now suddenly, after you make these allegations, and then, of course, the series debuts in Britain and is blocked here in India, you have action. Now, I'll just jog your memory back to when Tehelka was raided by agencies after its expose on Bangaru Lakshman in Operation West End. Outlook was raided by agencies after its stories on Ranjan Bhattacharya. This all happened, of course, in NDA 1 or the Vajpayee NDA. Dainik Bhaskar was recently raided a couple of years ago because it did some critical stories against the government during the COVID times. And we also have seen the UPA doing so. So at every stage, the courts, however, have come out and either ruled in favor of those that have been raided or surveyed, including the BBC. So why should we assume that this is not yet another fishing expedition?
Well, nobody would ask anybody to assume that, right? But I don't know. I don't know what IT's official. I'm told they've come out with a statement as to what an official statement as to what the scope of their survey is. But irrespective of that, right? Why jump to conclusions about IT motivations? I mean, wait and see what IT comes up with. If this is just an empty raid or an empty survey, right, without any basis, and it throws up nothing, then of course you can, scream murder against the IT department. But at the moment, we have to presume the constitutionality and legality of departmental actions.
So you're saying that the opposition,
and there is no doubt that there is Chinese, yes.
Okay, so you're saying, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but are you suggesting then that the opposition's alacrity is in some ways a knee-jerk, reflexive hate for Mr. Modi translating into support for the BBC, and they never applied these yardsticks to themselves when they were investigating the BBC? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I would put it a little more mildly. The opposition has a visceral dislike for Prime Minister Modi, right? And it is quite likely that is one of the main reasons that motivated them to make this wild allegation against the IT department. If not a wild allegation, at least an unjustified allegation, a premature allegation at this stage.
Okay, well, let's open this up further. Thank you, Mr. Jethmalani, for joining us. You've set the contours for this conversation that is going to follow tonight. Thank you very much. Well, viewers, that was Mr. Jethmani. Let's open this up. As I said, let's ask a few very straightforward questions tonight. And I want to begin first with Sanjay Jha and Sanju Verma. Sanju Verma, let me ask you this. Look, for a moment, let's assume that the BBC is biased. And in fact, I have taken you through a large number of facts that seem to suggest that there is something. And there is something to it. Haras Rafiq, former advisor to the UK government, is also here with us, and we've chatted a little back earlier, and he said that, look, there is a definite bias, and he'll explain that to us. So let's assume that is true. Okay. Let's assume what the BJP spokesperson, your colleague, said about the BBC to be true. But does that mean that they should be raided? That's a fundamental question that needs to be addressed, Sanju Verma, or surveyed, or call it what you want to. And is there now pressure on the IT? Remember, the IT department has still not come out with any official statement to tell us, A, what prompted them, number two, what they've recovered, number three, to get it right. Because if they don't get it right, that press freedom index, you know what it'll do to you. So respond.
Thank you, Rahul. Let me set some facts out on the table as we proceed. First and foremost, the Income Tax Department has said that there has been a persistent refusal on the part of the BBC to comply with transfer pricing norms. And without much ado, let me tell you that any international organization, when it does business in India, makes profits in India, as far as transfer pricing goes, it is guided by 3 acts. One is Section 92A of the Income Tax Act of 1961, Section 92F of the Income Tax Act of 1961, Section 10EA of the Income Tax Rules of 1962, and most importantly, Section 9 of the OECD norms. OECD, obviously the Organization of Economically Developed Countries. Now, BBC has been found in violation of all these norms. Transfer pricing norms of Income Tax Act of 1961, Section 10EA rules of 1962 of the Income Tax of India, and the Section 9 of OECD norms. What is transfer pricing? Very simply for your audience. When there is an entity which has multiple subsidiaries, which we know BBC has, it has a subscriber base of 450 million, with a setup in more than 200 countries. Transfer pricing simply says that when an entity operates with multiple subsidiaries across multiple geographies, it has to ensure that there is an arm's length between one subsidiary and the other. Now, arm's length is not something that we speak of in the metaphorical or in the literal sense. Right. In taxation terminology, arm's length simply means that each subsidiary of this entity will work with the aim of cost minimization and profit maximization without under-invoicing or over-invoicing, which may lead to tax evasion across subsidiaries. Now the Income Tax Department found that BBC, through its offices in Delhi and Mumbai, has been engaging in transfer pricing policies which are in contravention of the arm's length principle, which in simple layman terms means that they have either under-invoiced or over-invoiced the goods and services that are exchanged between BBC India and BBC UK with a mala fide intent to evade taxes. Now tell me one thing, if transfer pricing norms have been violated, should the Income Tax Department of India not carry out a bona fide investigation against the BBC?
Of course. Now, Sanju Verma.
Above the law of the land?
Of course. Very important. Sanju Verma making big charges. I want to ask you a simple question, Sanju Verma ji. You're a BJP national spokesperson. How did you find out about all of this? Itna proof, ye kahan se aapko pata hai? Because it's not in public domain. IT has not issued any statement. So, do they have a back channel to you?
No, Rahul Shivshankar ji, badi vinamrata se, at the start of your program, you laid out some facts, and in those facts also.
I never said there were facts. No, one second. One second. I said sources. No, one second. I have said sources have revealed this to Times Now. The facts that I was focusing on were the facts of the raids or the surveys or the notices sent under the UPA, which cannot be denied, and the exonerations by the court. So those are the facts.
Okay.
I want you to tell me, you said that the IT department, and this is a lot of information you have given me. Where did you find this information?
Rahul, let's be very honest. When we come on debates, especially a person like me, I don't speak through my hat.
So
I
are you
come with
saying that
facts
you
and
were
figures.
personally briefed behind the scenes by
I
the
was
income
not
tax
personally-
department?
Rahul, now you're being, what should I say? I can't even call you childish, or juvenile.
I really need to know, because there is no statement out in
yes.
public. So
When we come for a public discourse on a channel as important as Times Now, the
Right.
anchor is somebody as well read as Rahul Shivshankar, the facts are laid out.
So you must have been
before us.
briefed, obviously.
And this is a brief, but the brief is that there has been a violation of transfer pricing.
No.
guidelines.
That
Then
the
I
brief,
did some
okay. So the
digging.
brief you got, which was circulated.
Can
Now,
I
this is
finish?
where, viewers, there is a problem. Look, I have no love lost for the BBC. Let me tell you, viewers, very directly. Neither am I going to toot their horn here. But let me tell you, viewers, that there is no official statement. Now, the IT, the ED, or whatever it is, can give you information source-based. It must make it into the public domain, certified on a letterhead by the Enforcement Directorate, or in this particular case, the IT department. But no communication exists, viewers, in the official domain. So either the ED is briefing or the IT is briefing, like it's briefing the media, it's also briefing the party spokespersons or the party.
No, IT is not briefing us. Rahul, please don't twist my words.
We got it. Our reporters have got it from their IT sources.
The income tax department has given a briefing. You are completely untwisting my words. I said when I come on your show, I did homework. You have your
so
sources.
I'm asking you.
We have our sources
I'm asking
too.
you.
Homework.
We have our sources too.
Okay,
And
you have
income tax
sources.
department
Okay,
is
you
not
have sources.
bound-
So sources have
is not
told.
bound to make
Sources
every
have told.
disclosure in the public domain.
Sources
When I
have told
speak
the
to you as
BJP
national
spokesperson.
Please
Okay.
ensure it's the truth.
Okay, so sources.
speak to you as a
So
national
that's what I'm saying.
spokesperson,
So sources
I'm
have
giving
told you.
hard facts.
Okay,
I'm
so-
giving you hard facts.
Okay, I don't know
which
if they're
are
hard facts.
irrefutable.
They have to be.
Which
They
are
have to be.
irrefutable.
Okay, one second, Ms. Verma. These are not hard facts. These are not hard facts. They have to be proven in a court of law. So let's first set that aside. These are what the IT department is telling people off the record, viewers. That's what I want to establish here. That's what it is, because that's where we got it, and I made it very clear. Our disclosures on the screen, sources. But that is all immaterial for a few moments. Suspend all of that. I want to bring in Sanjay Jha. Sanjay Jha, touching faith you have in the BBC. You obviously believe that they're squeaky clean. Now, I have shown you examples of their bias against India. I'm not trying to conflate two issues. You can be biased, but you can perhaps be clean. It's a fact. But I want to ask you this. Why are you so upset that there has been a survey of the BBC? The IT department now has the onerous task of ensuring that their case sticks. Otherwise, people like you, rightly so, not perhaps today, but after 5 days or 10 days, will accuse the government of intimidating the BBC. I won't stop you then, but I want to ask you now, why vitiate the waters? What interest do you have in suggesting that the IT department is working in a malified way, especially if it is at the cost of Indian taxpayers, the government's treasuries, if there is under invoicing as Sanju Verma claims? It's us, the Indian taxpayer, that is being cheated. Why are you standing there to give the BBC a clean sheet even before the probe has reached any logical conclusion? Can you explain this? And don't give me this history about Modi being this. I want you to answer my question. Why give a clean sheet now?
Number one, Rahul, nobody here is a counsel for the BBC. I'm sure that organization can handle its own problems.
Are you saying
But
that...
we are all adults.
Hang on. 1 second, Sanjay Jha. That's unfair, because your party has come out and pretty much in the public domain exonerated, in the court of public opinion, exonerated the BBC. Should I read out what your
No,
colleagues
I
have
have
said?
read
No,
it.
one
I've read it
second.
now.
One
I've read
second.
it.
This
Let me
is an
answer your
undeclared
question.
emergency.
Oh yeah, that it is. Yeah. So
Okay, if it is, I'm asking you, if it is, why do you have, why is it that you have such great sympathies for the BBC? I want you to answer me. And if it is an undeclared emergency today, I'm sure it was a declared emergency in 75, 71, 72, etc., when the BBC was kicked out. So you can't claim the moral high ground. I'm only asking you, why are you running at full tilt to give the BBC a clean sheet today? Why?
Okay, now let me make my answer. India has experienced 108 months of an undeclared emergency under Narendra Modi. Mrs. Gandhi's emergency official lasted 21 months. Second point, everyone here on your program, the panelists and the viewers know that this is directly linked to the BBC documentary 1 and 2, which basically made Mr. Narendra Modi responsible for the Gujarat riots and the deaths that happened. That's what the BBC documentary said. Third, that documentary was not the view of the BBC. It was the view of the British government. It was the view of the British Foreign Office. So I think it's a very serious issue. It cannot be brushed away by saying this is a colonial mindset. Point number 4, to the best of my knowledge, the BBC is funded by the British taxpayer. And the last I heard, the BBC was extremely hostile towards Boris Johnson, the former Prime Minister, who actually wanted to defund the BBC itself. So for the BJP, I heard the BJP spokespersons today, I mean, they were sounding absolutely absurd to call this a Congress stooge. I mean, they have to make a fool of themselves. I mean, they have the full fundamental right to do so. So the truth of the life
okay, let's not speak over each other.
It is hurting the BJP.
Let him finish.
It is hurting Mr. Modi because the 2002 riots and the Mr. Prime Minister being called Nero by the Supreme Court is rediscovering itself in the public domain.
Okay.
It's tarnishing the image of Narendra Modi all over again.
Question.
It's a double whammy coupled with what's happening with Gautam Adani.
I knew you were going to make all those claims, and of course, as a politician, you're entitled to 1 second. Sanjay Verma, just give me 30 seconds. As a politician, you're entitled to make all these claims, no problems. But I asked you a very specific question. Now, you said everyone knows that Prime Minister Modi, then Chief Minister, was directly linked to the Gujarat 2002 riots. Who is this everybody? Because the last we checked, the Supreme Court, on the basis of the findings of the SIT that was set up and monitored by the Supreme Court, cleared Mr. Modi, and on the basis of its findings, the Supreme Court exonerated, dropped all charges, rejected all claims against Mr. Modi. So who is this then? Who are the everybody? The Lutyens, Mafia? Yeah. Who is this?
No.
Explain.
No, 1 minute. So let me give you two very factual data which is there in the public domain. Number 1, the Supreme Court said that the Gujarat government under Mr. Modi acted like Emperor Nero. And for those who don't know who Emperor Nero was, he's famous for twiddling his thumb while Rome burned. Number 2, and the insinuation is pretty explicit there. Number 2, as far as the SIT is concerned, let me be very clear.
Let him
finish. Supreme Court appointed amicus curiae who said that I disagree with the SIT.
Sanjay Jha, it's a very straight question to you. Did the Supreme Court in its final judgment exonerate Mr. Modi, yes or no?
That answer was only where the accusation of the criminal
or no
is concerned. No?
Yes or no? Criminal conspiracy is what matters. Criminal conspiracy was the basis of the charge. Yes or no?
Well,
yes
let me
or
ask
no?
you,
Don't say well.
If the BJP,
don't say, no, I'm asking you a very specific question. On the accusation, please, Mr. Jha, please, let's not speak over each other. I'm asking you a very simple question. I don't want to shout because, you speak, then I want to be heard, and then you will want to be heard over me, and we'll end up in a shouting match. I don't want that. I'm asking you, was he not exonerated of the main charge of criminal conspiracy, yes or no, by the Supreme Court? Just answer, yes or no.
The short answer is, they said there was not enough prosecutable evidence.
There you go.
And that, by the way,
if there was no evidence, and let me tell you, Sanju,
no, let me tell you,
Sanjay
that's
Jha,
the reason why the BJP government is
Sanjay Jha, 1 second.
To his teeth.
1 second. Sanju Verma needs to respond, and I want to open this up. I also want to bring in the ex-advisor to the UK government, Haras Rafiq, and he will bring us the facts as he saw them. Now, Yes, Sanju Verma, quick response.
The quick response is this, that in June 2022, in a historic verdict, the Supreme Court said some very clear things. A, Teesta Setalwad's dubious antecedents need to be acknowledged and investigated. B, there was no proof that Zakia Jafri could provide, and the Supreme Court said she was being used as a puppet by Teesta Setalwad. And the most important point which the Supreme Court said, quote unquote, Teesta Setalwad acted with an ulterior motive to keep the pot boiling, and the Supreme Court, while applauding the SIT, said that the SIT came out with a brilliant investigation despite challenging political compulsion.
Let me also say,
and gave Prime Minister Modi a clean, unconditional, clean chit. Sanjay Jha, stop lying on national television and making a fool of yourself.
Okay, one second. I also want to quote. No, 1 minute, Sanjay Jha, 1 second, please. I also want to quote what the Supreme Court said about the SIT. Now, viewers, this is very important. Supreme Court praises the SIT and says the appellant was trying to undermine the integrity of the SIT, question the wisdom of the courts, despite the humongous task undertaken by the members of the SIT with sincerity, objectivity, and dispassionately, including to the satisfaction of this court. In all these cases, the argument of the appellant was bordering on undermining the integrity and sincerity of the members of the SIT. Needless to underscore that the SIT came to be constituted by this court of experienced senior officials with proven ability of investigating complex offences. Therefore, we find such submission as not only far-fetched and an attempt to undo and undermine the industry of the SIT in having thoroughly investigated all 9 sets of cases assigned to it by this court, but also in the nature of questioning the wisdom of this court. Very critical. Hence, the assail of the appellant needs to be stated to be rejected while observing sobriety. We say no more. So viewers, when Sanjay Jha says that the world directly knows, the Supreme Court, relying on the excellent agency of the SIT, gave Mr. Modi a clean chit. Now, secondly, the Congress says, oh, the BBC documentary is based on an intelligence report compiled by a bunch of people who reported to Jack Straw, the then Foreign Secretary of the UK. Who was Jack Straw, viewers? He was a liar.
Exactly.
He cooked up facts to have millions of Muslims killed. He said that Saddam Hussein had nuclear weapons. He agreed with the Americans. They went to war. You can see the basket case that Iraq and now Syria has become. Because hundreds and thousands of Muslims are being killed. And the Congress party today has lock, stock and barrel put its faith in Jack Straw, the mass murderer of Muslims. I mean, to do what, viewers? We've got to ask ourselves this question. Again, I'm not exonerating the IT here. I don't know, viewers. But we need to ask some questions. Let's open this up further. Aarti Tikku, you're a senior journalist. You've lived through those periods of 2002. You've seen the BBC at close quarters. I have a story about the BBC which I'm not going to disclose, viewers, and that gave me an insight into their mindset. But I'm not going to put myself into the news. Aarti Tikku and Haras Rafiq, let me bring them in. Aarti Tikku, what's your view? Is the BBC today, let's for a few moments talk a little bit about the raids. Is it being punished for bringing out this film, or would this have happened in the normal course?
Rahul, thank you so much. Well, to begin with, you yourself pointed out certain facts that this is not for the first time that BBC has been surveyed or raided by the tax officials. So I don't understand what the issue really is, except for the fact that certain people in this country probably think of themselves as the rightful heirs of the British colonial masters. And I think there is a certain inferiority complex in being simple brown Hindus. And that is why these people, English-speaking people, somewhere also think very low of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, a common Indian. They think very low of people who cannot speak English as fluently and in the same Oxford, Cambridge accent that they themselves do. And I think the problem really is not the raids on BBC, because I don't see the same set of people coming out in or protesting against the raids which were held against several newspapers. Tomorrow there might be a raid on Times Group, but you think the same people will come in its defense? No, absolutely not. The problem really is the hatred, as Mr. Jethmalani was rightly pointing out. Hatred for Prime Minister Modi's government, Prime Minister Modi's background, which is a common Indian's background. These people who, wine and dine with the British, who wine and dine with the Americans, they take their word as biblical truth. That is why they have greater faith in a serial liar like Jack Straw. They have faith in BBC, which is now being questioned by the Britons themselves. In fact, last week, one whole week, the British people, the British taxpayers actually led a movement against BBC, saying that we are not going to give them even one single pound, because BBC is now justifying and making heroines out of ISIS brides. Imagine that, like ISIS brides are now being showcased as heroines who have suddenly seen the final enlightenment and now are being showcased as
you're saying,
heroic
Aarti
people.
Tikku, that the opposition here should not eat out of the palm of foreign media. That's what you're basically saying. And they should not be standing up for their editorial or their financial...
Absolutely.
Okay, standards, fine. Okay, let me just bring in Haras Rafiq. India wants to hear Haras Rafiq because he's a former advisor to the UK government. He's also a counter-terrorist expert and an advisor to two governments, in fact, two prime ministers. Now, objectively, Mr. Rafiq, what's your assessment of the BBC's coverage of Modi, his prime ministership, and India?
No, absolutely. There's definitely been a bias, and you have to look at how institutionally the BBC has become quite, from a UK perspective, quite left of centre. So much so that there have been attacks even on the UK current government, which is centre-right, by calling them far-right and various things. There are people within the BBC, there are producers, there are reporters, there are presenters that actually regard the current Prime Minister of India as being, from their perspective, far right. And that is a bit of an ideological challenge going on from the UK BBC perspective against that perceived and viewed ideology. And definitely there has to be, if you're taking on people who you regard as the enemy, politically, you think that they're actually doing things that are against humanity. In this case, they believe that there's a firm belief that the Modi government is actually quite anti-Muslim within the BBC. That's quite obvious in the bias that we've seen. And if you see this as the enemy politically, ideologically, then you're going to have bias. And we have seen this bias, certainly against India, over recent times.
So is this bias, and you're calling it out, motivated by vested interests?
Oh, it's definitely vested interest. We've seen over the last few decades what I call entryism. And entryism is where people of a certain ideology, and we know there are people who are Islamists that have actually entered into different departments within the BBC. I say Islamist, as Islamism is for me a political ideology as opposed to Islam, the religion. The faith practiced by billions of people around the world in so many different ways. There is a vested interest politically from an Islamist perspective where they've actually merged with the people that I mentioned, people from the left. And there is what we call a red-green alliance forming. And Modi is very, very clearly seen as the enemy. The other vested interest is that there are people within, as mentioned, the BBC has over 22,000 employees. There are people who want to actually make a name for themselves. And the only way they can make a name for themselves is by actually courting controversy, by actually feeding into a wider bias that we are seeing within the UK amongst certain Red Green Alliance members. Feeding into that, they can create a name for themselves. They can build a career. They can actually go further. And the BBC has a history of this. If we look at the interview that Martin Bashir did with the late Princess Diana, at the time it was regarded as a worldwide scoop, and it was. But since then, the BBC has been criticised. Martin Bashir has been criticised. He's been fired from his position because he actually, for his own personal vested interest, used deceitful tactics to actually get Princess Diana to go on in the first place. So there are personal interests in any organisation where you have a lot of people, and the BBC certainly has that, like any others.
Okay, so let me, Mr. Rafiq, ask you this. The BBC amplified Jack Straw's claims on 2002 riots in its documentary. Now, there was a report on the basis of which it amplified these claims. Was that also driven by vested interests in your analysis?
Oh, absolutely. I believe they were, because if you look at Jack Straw in the first place, when Jack Straw was Foreign Secretary in the UK, his constituency, he was elected Member of Parliament for Blackburn, and he relied heavily on the Islamist vote in Blackburn. So Jack Straw has been very, very close to certain Islamists, certain Muslim organizations which have vested interest in individuals, even to the point where he was involved in promoting the largest Islamist organization here in the UK, the Muslim Council of Britain. And since then, later on, Tony Blair removed them from the government table, and then David Cameron did as well again. There are vested interests at play here, because he himself, first of all, has a certain bias, a certain motivation that he had in those days. But now, if you look at the UK, because let's not forget, the documentary, I believe, was made primarily for a UK audience. And in the UK, following the Leicester troubles we saw in Leicester recently, where groups and gangs of, overwhelmingly, there were people who happened to be of Muslim background. They were in the majority of people causing the trouble, but there were some pockets of people who were originally from India as well that were there. This actually feeds onto that narrative. The narrative that is at play here in the UK, that the Modi government is anti-Muslim, the Modi government is somebody that suppresses the ability for Muslims to live peacefully in India, and that particular ideology is being exported around the world. That is the belief amongst many people that are working at the BBC and other parts of civil society in the UK as well.
Well, let me ask you my final question. Some would ask, with what authority or in what capacity can you make these claims of vested interest? I would like you to answer that.
I think that it's the BBC, first of all, the viewers need to understand, as I mentioned, it's a large organization. The viewers need to understand that there are different departments, there are different people, there are different vested interests in play. And there are people that will actually use the platform of the BBC. So therefore, to actually say it's the BBC is actually not going to get the right level of results. What I think that I've been observing, and many others, is that there are people within the BBC who have certainly promoted extremist narratives in the UK and extremist individuals. And we saw that with the Leicester trouble recently, where there were Islamists that were being heavily pushed on mainstream media, not just the BBC, but other platforms as well. But if I look at this from a background that I have in countering extremism, not quite countering terrorism, countering extremism, looking at the way that one of the vested interests that we could have in this is that recently the BBC has had some very, very senior presenters come out against the UK government. Let's not forget that at the moment, the UK is in the middle of the process of trying to tie up quite a large trade deal with India. And one of the things that the BBC individuals that I talk about and the departments would like to do is also usurp the UK government. Right. So I'm looking at this from an extremism perspective. I'm looking at this from and when I say extremism, I mean extremism with as a definition where it's...
This is very interesting, very interesting. Viewers, here's another example. Look at this. This is something I want to show you. These are two BBC reports. Coronavirus. Lockdowns in Europe saved millions of lives. And right under another piece, India COVID-19 : PM Modi did not consult before lockdown. So in Europe, you can lock up people, send them home, shut down businesses, and that saves millions of lives. But here, we always look at the agenda. It's so clear.
Exactly.
It's so absolutely clear. And if that is the case, I just want to ask you, Ashutosh ji, I want to ask the Congress other leader Vivek Bansal, Tushar Gupta, Ashutosh ji, why are we jumping lemming-like to salvage the BBC's reputation? It's being surveyed. What's the problem if they're being surveyed? Why are you supporting an organization that doesn't really have much? And I'm sure you're an Indian. The Prime Minister is also your Prime Minister. And if there are these allegations of bias, as Mr. Rafiq has leveled, and he looks at it from an insider's perspective, aren't you looking like those who are providing fig leaf to an agenda?
Rahul, first of all, I don't think Mr. Rafiq is saying the gospel truth. So necessarily, I don't have to agree with him. I fail to understand that. No. I fail to understand that Jack Straw in Iraq is a Muslim mass murderer. That's what has been assumed. And in India, he's an anti-Hindu and pro-Muslim. So I fail to understand. My premise is very simple. And premise is, if tomorrow, if the Times Now is raided or surveyed by Income Tax Department, I'll defend that also. I will not defend that. I will rather come to criticize the government that why are you raiding a media house? It's as simple. And that's a reason enough. First of all, I want to understand whether we are discussing here Gujarat riots, or we are discussing the Supreme Court has given clean sheet to the Narendra Modi, or we are discussing here that Income Tax Department has surveyed the BBC. Or we are discussing here that BBC is a third-rate global news media brand. I'm a little confused after watching your discussion with the different persons. And I can understand very well that the BJP spokesperson had all the information.
Ashutosh ji, one second. Look, one second. There's no reason to be confused. I've already said that the raid or survey, or call it what you want to, would have been based on certain parameters. Nothing out. We don't even know if it's true. And I've also made the declaration that all allegations in the past have fallen flat, and there's a possibility that this one might be too. And if that is indeed the case, the IT department has to come up with the goods, because if they don't, then they will be accused of vendetta, and rightly so. So we have made that claim.
Because entire argument which has been given here, starting from the Mahesh Jethmalani, since Supreme Court has given a clean sheet to Mr. Narendra Modi on the Gujarat riot, that means there should be, in future, no book should be written.
Hang on. Ashutosh ji, I am in public domain to say the ban was wrong. The ban on the documentary is wrong. I'm in public domain. I've said it on this show. So don't confuse issues here.
Let me complete.
I'm only asking you a very... No, please. This is a very straightforward question.
Let me complete.
No, please. Because there has been enough selectivity.
I waited patiently for 45 minutes.
No, Ashutosh ji, 1 second. I will allow you to just bear me out. See, you're trying to muddle the issue. I'm not on this at all. I asked you very simply, let the process play itself out. When certain media houses have been surveyed, there's been absolute silence.
Can I speak?
Yeah, of course.
Can I speak?
Of course, Ashutosh ji.
If we are talking about the BBC being surveyed by the Income Tax Department, is that an issue, or the Gujarat riot is an issue?
I'm telling you.
Confuse this.
There is nothing to be confused. Tushar, okay. Tushar Gupta. No, 1 second. Sanju Verma, 1 second. I interrogated Sanju Verma. No, 1 second. I interrogated Sanju Verma here in the beginning of this show, because she made certain assumptions. She called them facts, which we can't today. Okay, 1 second. Let me bring in Tushar Gupta, Swarajya.
That proves it.
1 second. Tushar Gupta.
Income Tax Department has gone to the BJP. That means BJP is part of the conspiracy in this IT survey on BBC.
Okay.
And it is being done with a malified intention.
Malified intent, says Ashutosh. Tushar Gupta.
Department of the country.
Okay, 1 second, Sanju Verma, 1 second, please. 1 second. Swarajya Magazine's senior editor, Tushar Gupta, I want to ask you this simple question. Do these raids smack of vendetta? Is the timing suspect?
Look, Rahul, in the last 45 minutes, tall claims have been made about India's democracy, how the government of the day is dictatorial or not. So let's keep that aside for a moment. People who are opposing the raids or the surveys will believe that the United Kingdom, where the BBC comes from, is a democracy. The newspapers there are operating in all the freedom. But do any of them know that BBC is being investigated by the tax department in the United Kingdom for evading taxes? In 2019, according to the BBC's annual report, they had to set aside £12 million to settle for tax evasion. In 2017, they had paid £8.3 million just to settle any taxes that they might owe the government. Presenters and radio jockeys of the BBC have testified before the parliamentarians in the United Kingdom that they were hired in a way using special tax vehicles that enabled the BBC not to pay pensions, insurances as they would have paid for any normal employee. So all those who are giving a clean chit to the BBC today, citing Modi's dictatorial regime or India's lack of democracy and all that, have they actually gone and made an effort to dig into the history of tax evasion by the BBC in United Kingdom of all places? And this has been reported by The Guardian, Rahul Shivshankar. This is not some opinion I'm citing. This is cited by a UK newspaper about the UK's state corporation. So why give a clean chit? Why make that?
Vivek Bansal, what is happening, what happens in Rome or what happens in London doesn't stay in London. Maybe this is maybe a problem, a deeper one, Vivek Bansal. So maybe we just need to look a little closer under the hood before we give a clean chit. If it's happening in England, why shouldn't it be happening here?
Rahul, we are not here to give a clean chit or to indict anybody for that matter. It's a question of the people citing so many instances about BBC's role, BBC's past demeanor or past objectivity or past biases they talked about. Let me just cite you our Honorable Prime Minister. He was swearing by BBC when he was the Chief Minister of Gujarat, citing its authenticity, citing that at that point of time, BBC was the last word, or as Madam Tikku said, the gospel, this biblical truth. So these all are the facts. What we mean to say, we are not saying that and what if suppose you are citing that during the UPA government, their surveys were done. But there is a difference between a survey and a raid. And at the same time, the timing, it appears to be, there is something more to it than meets the eye. It's a remarkable coincidence that few weeks ago, their film had been banned. I don't go into the objectivity of the film. Whatever objectivity was there, whatever the truth was there, whatever biases may have been there, in a democracy, we are talking about, the moment you talk about democracy, you tend to revert back to the emergency. Emergency was, at that point of time.
Two wrongs don't make a right, says Mr. Bansal. Two wrongs I don't know what the point you're trying to make. Tushar, yes, you want to respond.
Opposition's logic is to be used because everyone has been making the same statement, the timing. So tomorrow, if someone wants to evade taxes in India, they should just criticize the government. And then by the opposition's logic, the taxman won't be able to touch them.
Okay, well, I just want to say, viewers, when you take on an organization like the BBC or any other organization around the world, especially that which is a press body, then you better have the goods. You better come up with the goods in a court of law. You better be able to defend your case, because otherwise, you're inevitably going to be accused of overreach. We're now being told that the IT surveys on BBC will be continuing. There's more breaking news coming in. The Newshour comes up. We're going to take this forward. Viewers, don't go away.
आ चुका है पोको X5 Pro का बॉक्स टेबल पे। अब इसको जल्दी से करेंगे अनबॉक्स। ब्लैक और येलो कलर का ये बॉक्स है, जो ज्यादातर पोको के स्मार्टफोन पे आपको येलो कलर, जो इसका सिग्नेचर कलर है, वो दिखाई देगा। Sometimes it is really tricky to take the tapes off, so let me try it with my nails. One tape down successfully. गाइज, ये जो फीलिंग है ना अनबॉक्स करने वाली, ये काफी ही मजेदार लगती है। जब भी आप कोई नया गैजेट अनबॉक्स करते हैं तो मजा तो आता है। जैसे कि यहाँ देखेंगे बॉक्स के पीछे की तरफ बहुत सारे डिटेल्स दिखे हैं, बॉक्स के बारे में फीचर्स लिखे हैं, वो दिखाएंगे और उसके बारे में बात करेंगे जब फोन हाथ में आ जाएगा। इनसाइड द बॉक्स यू गेट दिस लिटिल पेपर बॉक्स एज वेल, जिसमें ज्यादातर पेपर वर्क और प्रोटेक्टिव केस ही होता है। लाइक आई सेड वही मिला है हमको। यहाँ पर एक छोटा सा मैनुअल टाइप है। यहाँ पर फोन पे को प्रोटेक्ट करने के लिए आपको मिलता है ट्रांसपेरेंट प्रोटेक्टिव केस और साथ में सिम इजेक्टर टूल विच इज वेरी बेसिक। अब मुझे बॉक्स के अंदर दिखाई दे रहा है हमारा डिवाइस जिसके बारे में ये वीडियो बना रहे हैं। उफ, very vibrant and peppy yellow color. Just like the box, the smartphone also boasts the combination of black or call it dark gray along with yellow. और कॉम्प्लीमेंटिंग डिजाइन आपको फ्रेम्स पर भी दिखेगा। जो कलर आपको यहाँ कैमरा मॉड्यूल पर दिख रहा है, पीछे ये जो पैच पर दिख रहा है, वही आपको उसी कलर का फ्रेम दिखाई देगा विद येलो एक्सेंट्स। वेट की बात करें तो अच्छा है, लाइट वेट है और यहाँ पे जो येलो है दिस इज लिटिल बिट डल, नॉट एज वाइब्रेंट एज द बॉक्स और प्रॉपर येलो। वैसे तो मैट फिनिशिंग है लेकिन ये जो कलर है इसके अंदर हल्का सा ग्लिटर आपको दिखाई देता है। फ्लैशी नहीं है, अच्छा है। इसको साइड में रखते हैं, अभी ऑन भी करेंगे और उसके बाद स्मार्टफोन के बारे में बात करेंगे। पहले देखते हैं और क्या आपको बॉक्स के अंदर दिखाई देगा। You also get a 67 watt charging brick. I really liked how they have written 67 watt here. बहुत ही बढ़िया फॉन्ट लग रहा है, कुछ डिफरेंट देखने को मिला, वरना ज्यादातर यहाँ पर नॉर्मली लिख देते हैं 67 और 80। तो ये जो इसने हल्का सा छोटा सा अटेम्प्ट किया है विद द डिजाइन, आई रियली लाइक। साथ में आपको मिलता है टाइप सी केबल विद ऑरेंज एक्सेंट्स, जैसे कि आप यहाँ देख पा रहे होंगे। इसको भी साइड में रखते हैं एंड दैट्स इट, दैट्स ऑल यू गेट इनसाइड द बॉक्स। अब बात करते हैं स्मार्टफोन के बारे में, जरा मुझे इसे ऑन करने दीजिए। फोन को यहाँ पर सेटअप करना मैंने शुरू कर दिया है। जैसे कि आप देख पाएंगे दिस फोन रन्स ऑन MIUI 14। साथ इसको हम सेट करते रहेंगे और फोन के बारे में बात करते रहेंगे, बिकॉज यही तो सबसे ज्यादा बढ़िया पॉइंट होता है जब भी आप नया फोन सेटअप करते हैं, द फीलिंग ऑफ सेटिंग अप एंड शिफ्टिंग टू अ न्यू स्मार्टफोन। तो यहाँ पर इसको सेटअप कर रहे हैं। टिल दैट टाइम लेट मी टॉक अबाउट द डिस्प्ले। तो यहाँ पर आपको विद पोको X5 Pro मिलता है AMOLED डिस्प्ले with the support of 120 Hz refresh rate. Basically, scrolling, animations should be smoother.
The show tonight, viewers.
Union Home Minister Amit Shah says BJP has no competition for the upcoming general elections next year and Prime Minister Modi enjoys massive public support. Shah dismisses immediate threat from Khalistanis, however, says that the agencies are maintaining a close watch on such outfits in India and abroad. On the PFI ban, Home Minister says that the government banned the outfit, rising above vote bank politics as PFI promotes radicalism and religious bigotry.
mm एक्स्ट्रा, लंबा व्हील बेस, सेकेंड रो में ज्यादा जगह। यह है कहानी BMW 3GL की। नमस्ते टाइम्स ड्राइव फैमिली, आई एम क्रांति संभव। वेलकम टू द फर्स्ट ड्राइव रिव्यू ऑफ BMW 3 सीरीज GL यानी ग्रैंड लिमोजीन, जो ऑब्वियसली रेगुलर 3 सीरीज से ज्यादा लंबी है व्हील बेस के हिसाब से। कुछ एक चेंजेस इसमें हुए हैं, तो इस वजह से ये हम वीडियो कर रहे हैं उन चेंजेस के बारे में बताने के लिए और ये भी जानने के लिए कि जो दावा है कंपनी का सेकेंड रो में ज्यादा आराम का, ज्यादा स्पेस का, वो दावा पूरा हो पा रहा है या नहीं। सो बिफोर आई स्टार्ट टॉकिंग अबाउट दिस कार, सबसे पहले टाइम्स ड्राइव के बारे में आपसे बात करता हूं या अपील करता हूं। अभी तक अगर आपने सब्सक्राइब नहीं किया है तो प्लीज सब्सक्राइब कीजिए हमारे चैनल को और सोशल मीडिया पर बाकी जो भी हैंडल्स हैं वहां पर टाइम्स ड्राइव के नाम से आप सर्च करें, उसे भी फॉलो करें। लेटेस्ट खबरें आपको मिलेंगी और timesdrive.in है हमारा वेबसाइट, वहां पर तो लेटेस्ट खबरों के अलावा डिस्काउंट्स और जो स्पाई पिक्स हैं, आने वाली गाड़ियां हैं, उन सब के बारे में खबरें मिलेंगी। तो लेट्स स्टार्ट दिस स्टोरी। हम बात करते हैं BMW 3GL की। Kranti Sambhav reporting from
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A massive political storm has erupted over the income tax searches today at the BBC India offices. The Income Tax Department conducted surveys at BBC's offices in Delhi and Mumbai in connection with alleged tax evasion and transfer pricing irregularities. But the ecosystem has linked these searches with the alleged propaganda documentary on Prime Minister Modi and called it an undeclared emergency in the country. The opposition parties have claimed that the searches were nothing but petty retaliation for the BBC's documentary and that instead of acting against Adani, the government was targeting the BBC. The BJP has slammed the opposition for its unfounded criticism and asked it to let the Income Tax Department do its job. Now, sources have told Times Now that the tax department is looking into the manipulation of prices for unauthorized benefits and that the BBC has been persistently and deliberately violative of transfer price rules. The Income Tax Department has also said that the BBC is a repeat offender and has been reportedly non-compliant for years. Let's take a look at what transpired earlier today.
It's little over 10 a.m. and behind me there were several IT sleuths entering this building, knocking at BBC's door here at KG Marg in New Delhi.
The Mumbai unit has reportedly roped in other departments as well. The Income Tax Department maintains that these are not raids or searches, but the survey conducted to look into the alleged tax evasion on part of BBC.
Highly placed sources in Income Tax Department have told Times Now that BBC in India have been defiant and non-compliant to summons that have been issued earlier and diverting a significant amount of their profit. And that's the reason why these surveys are being carried out today.
It's close to 11:30 a.m. and the action has begun to unfold at the BBC office here in Mumbai. Reportedly, the income tax officials have also switched off the mobile phones of the staff members present inside the BBC office, and also the collection of their digital data has also been started with regards to the commercial purpose used for the BBC News.
This has triggered a massive political storm, with the opposition calling it as a predictable action, a sign of panic and a dictatorial move.
The BBC has said that it's fully cooperating with the authorities and hopes that the situation is going to be resolved soon. However, the opposition is relentless in its attack on the government. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is despite the fact that during the UPA regime, similar tax notices were sent to BBC, which were later even quashed by the Delhi High Court in 2014 and 2016. And two notices, remember, in 2009 and 2010 pertaining to earlier years. Not to forget, during the Congress regime, the party had even accused the BBC of doing notoriously anti-India stories and maligning India with willful misrepresentation. Let's now listen in to what the Congress had to say today.
यहाँ हम जेपीसी की मांग कर रहे हैं अडानी के मामले में, और वहाँ सरकार बीबीसी के पीछे पड़ी हुई है. विनाशकाले विपरीत बुद्धी.
बीबीसीच्या कार्यालयावरती दिल्लीमध्ये धाड पडलेली आहे, धाड टाकलेली आहे. एखाद्या प्रसार माध्यमाच्या कार्यालयावरती धाड टाकणं हे कोणत्या लोकशाहीत बसतं? म्हणजेच काय की आम्ही वाटेल ते करू, पण तुम्ही आवाज नाही उठवायचा. जर आवाज उठवाल तर चिरडून टाकू. ही जी एक पाशवी वृत्ती आपल्या देशामध्ये आज फोफावायला बघते, ती आपण वेळेमध्ये एकत्र आलो नाही आणि आपली ताकद वाढवली नाही तर उद्या संपूर्ण देश खाऊन टाकेल.
भारतीय जनता पार्टी बीबीसी से बहुत परेशान थी। उनके लिए बीबीसी पिछले 1 महीने से सबसे बड़ा खतरा था। इससे सिर्फ प्रधानमंत्री जी की या केंद्र की नहीं, पूरे भारत की छवि जो है खराब हो रही है।
बीबीसी की जो डॉक्यूमेंट्री फिल्म बनी, उसमें ऐसा क्या नया था जिसे इस अधिनायक सुप्रीमेसिस्ट सरकार को गुस्सा है? बीबीसी में जिस तरह के छापे पड़े हैं, समाजवादी पार्टी इसे डिफर करती है।
The BJP has hit right back at the ecosystem with the Union Home Minister Amit Shah saying that the truth emerges despite 1,000 conspiracies surrounding it and that the BBC has been after Modi since 2002. The BJP has also called the BBC a brushed bakwas corporation. Listen it.
देखिए, सत्य जो होता है इस पर 1000 कॉन्स्पिरेसी कर लो, कुछ नहीं होता है। वो करोड़ों सूर्य की भांति तेजस्वी बनकर ही बाहर आता है। ये तो मोदी जी के पीछे 2002 से कर रहे हैं और हर बार मोदी जी मजबूत होकर, सच्चे बनकर और जनता की ज्यादा लोकप्रियता हासिल कर बाहर आए हैं।
अगर कुछ गलत किया नहीं है, कानून का पालन किया है, तो फिर डर कैसा? बीबीसी के अगर कृत्य देखें तो यह पूरे विश्व की सबसे भ्रष्ट बकवास कॉरपोरेशन हो गई है। और दुख की बात यह है कि बीबीसी का प्रोपेगेंडा और कांग्रेस का एजेंडा एक साथ मेल खाता है। और यह कहना गलत नहीं है। क्यों ऐसा होता है कि कांग्रेस का हाथ देश विरोधियों के साथ?
I think the opposition is acting very prematurely because they do not know the reason why. They're just putting 2 and 2 together and making it a political issue. Fact of the matter is the IT, before it conducts a raid like this, and I'm told it's starting with a survey, is entitled to do it. That's their job. I mean, there are income tax violations. Are we saying that BBC is above the law? Give the IT some time to establish its case and bring it out in the public realm before you start making these allegations.
So the legitimate question we are asking on the Newshour tonight, is this intimidation or routine investigation on BBC? That's the question and the debate. Hashtag BBC searched. The debate coming up on the other side.
You're watching the Newshour at 9. Debate number 1 on Times Now. Super Prime Time.
And joining the debate tonight is Dr. Anand Ranganathan, author, Ishkaran Bhandari, advocate, Karthik Reddy, spokesperson of the BRS, Sanjay Hegde, senior advocate in the Supreme Court, Dr. Sanjay Jha, author and suspended Congress leader, Tehseen Poonawala, political analyst, supports the Congress party. But my first question goes to Mr. Gaurav Bhatia, national spokesperson of the BJP. Mr. Gaurav Bhatia, the charges against the BJP are several, starting from intimidation, revenge, trying to kill press freedom in this country, to kill democracy. And on the other hand, your one-line statement is just about a routine search. The timing of this routine search, why is it just within a month of the banned documentary by the BBC, is the question raised by your critics. How do you respond?
Navika, it is not the Bharatiya Janata Party that has to respond to the frivolous charges of the opposition. Rather, it is the BBC that has to act like a responsible organization, law-abiding organization, and show the citizens of India that they believe in rule of law. They are not above the law of the country and the constitution. Number 2, is it not correct that the IT department has served notices to the BBC? Now it is for the BBC, and they have made a statement that they are cooperating with the inquiry being held by the IT department. The question is this, that if the inquiry itself is suffering from the vice of malefice, why don't they move the court and get it quashed? Second, when the survey is being conducted and it's an ongoing process right now, what's this tearing rush of the opposition parties to give a clean chit to the BBC and condemn the IT department action. That itself speaks volumes, and it shows that with the poor track record that BBC has against India, the Congress party and the opposition parties have decided to stand with the BBC rather than have faith in the IT department. Last but not the least, when they make charges of taking away the rights of the citizens, of freedom of speech and expression, I am reminded how Indira Gandhi banned BBC for 2 years. It was Indira Gandhi who invoked emergency, and if there was a black day after independence in India, it was the imposition of emergency by Indira Gandhi. So the Congress party should just wait for the outcome of this survey and then comment. I think that would augur well. And last but not the least, one more thing I would say. They're questioning the timing. Navika, you tell me, we have shown that under Narendra Modi ji, all the investigating agencies and the IT department is truly independent and autonomous. So the IT department should ask the government, क्योंकि documentary आई है, मैं अभी रुक जाऊं या मैं अपना काम करूं? I think, nothing could be more frivolous as an argument given by the Congress. I think the IT department should be allowed to do their job.
Well, so Tehseen Poonawalla, my question to you arising out of what Gaurav Bhatia has said is simply this. 1970, Indira Gandhi had banned BBC, and the ban I think continued till 1972 and then 1975 again, and there have been occasions when members of parliament of the Congress party, 41 of them got together to demand a ban and get BBC out of this country. They have routinely made allegations that anti-India propaganda is done by the BBC. You have also, the Congress government has also sent notices pertaining to 2002, 2003, in 2009 and in 2010, pertaining to the Vajpayee government time period. Why is this suddenly become a charge of vendetta when Congress has routinely done this in the past?
Thank you, ma'am. Namaste, namaskar to all your viewers and to all my fellow panelists. Three things that are essentially said by the erudite Bajpa spokesperson. Number one, Indira ji evoked the emergency, and like you rightly said, she banned BBC. So because a wrong happened by Indira ji, tomorrow the Bharatiya Janata Party will evoke the emergency and say, oh, Indira ji did it in 1970. Is that justified? Is there any sort of a logic in that? Point number two, let's come to the next thing. BBC is anti-national. I'm saying it's anti-national, it's terrible, it's bad for this country. So take action against those charges. What is the survey? And looking into people's phones, if there's a transfer price, share rigging, etc., are you going to look into journalists who are working today into allegations from 2002, 2003, 2008, 2010 or whenever, 2014 into what's happening? And there's a pattern, ma'am, a pattern that cannot be missed. NDTV is raided on June 2017, the Quint in October 2018, Greater Kashmir October 2020, NewsClick in February 2021, Bharat Samachar in July 2021, Dainik Bhaskar when it put out a report against a terrible mismanagement of COVID, July 2021 it's raided, The Wire November 2022. All of these media houses were critical of the government. Now I feel firmly somebody is misguiding the most honorable Prime Minister. This documentary would have got no traction. I've said so on your show. Suddenly they come up with hammers, they try to ban this documentary, it goes on every phone, students are screening it. Now when the attention is moved away from the documentary, you've gone and conducted this survey/raid saying whatever you want to say. But your track record speaks for itself, and the more you try to suppress whatever you're trying to hide, the more it will come out. How long are you going to try to suppress it? So if BBC is anti-national, or as Gaurav said, bakwas, brushed corporation, you take action there against those anti-national charges. Why are you serving it when it's critical of you? That doesn't add up, nor do the other raids that have happened in what I just showed you.
Well, Dr. Anand Ranganathan, searches at BBC have created such a furor. Not one of them raised their voice when in 2015 the BBC documentary on the Delhi rape case was to be broadcast, and this was called Delhi's Daughter. The question really is, that time what was the Modi government doing? It was banning a documentary that would have probably shown the UPA government in poor light. So not a whimper from the Congress party then. But look at them all up in arms today. You see a pattern in this as well?
Good evening, Navika. There are 4 issues here. Number 1, is the IT survey a bona fide technical investigation after providing enough notices to the BBC? The answer is yes. And BBC has always been anti-Modi. So that means the agency should never conduct a survey because it would be seen as vindictive move at all times. Number 2, was the BBC similarly investigated by the Congress? The answer is yes, in 2009 and 2010. But was India called a fascist state then? The answer is no. In fact, the UPA forced even amnesty to close down its offices. But then again, India was a shining beacon of democracy and not a fascist state. Number 3, is the BBC a fake news peddling, selective and fraudulent organization? The answer is yes, and I have spoken on this multiple times in the last month with 27 facts. Number 4, Navika, this is important. I have said this before and I say it again. Tehseen also does have a point. Out of the 10 media houses that this government has raided over past so many years, 9 out of 10 have been critical of the current dispensation. And every CBI, ED or IT raid or a survey carries the baggage of being politically motivated, even if it is not. Because 1, the investigative agencies are not apolitical or independent, they remain parrots. And when you domesticate a parrot, it finds its favorite shoulder. And right now the favorite shoulder is of Modi. Number 2, years of trial and error have now resulted in an established recourse that those who are raided or surveyed take. A, if the raided are a media house or an NGO like BBC or Amnesty, they cry government vendetta. And B, if the raided are politicians, they simply join the BJP. From Goa to Manipur to Bengal to Karnataka, every single politician when in trouble has dipped himself into this Behti Ganga, that is the BJP. Then miraculously, all leads go cold. All investigations come to a dead end. Remember Mukul Roy and how the investigations on him went cold when he joined the BJP? They have restarted, by the way, after he has returned to the TMC. Remember when the BJP's GVL Narasimha Rao had demanded an ED and IT raid and had written to the Rajya Sabha Ethics Committee alleging involvement of TDP's YS Chaudhary in, quote, massive financial bungling and fraud of 5,700 crores, unquote, and sought his disqualification over, quote, a serious breach of ethics, unquote. Well, before the Rajya Sabha could act, Mr. Chaudhary promptly joined the BJP, forcing Mr. Rao to eat the humble pie. That the CBI, ET and ID agencies are the most potent weapon in a politician's hand is not conspiratorial cynicism, Navika, but a statement based on precedent. Just give me 30 seconds. Remember, it was the BJP that staged a nationwide protest in May 2010, crying that the UPA was using the CBI, ED and IT to, quote, blackmail opposition leaders to toe the line on budget proposals, unquote. And in September 2013, Mr. Jaitley complained to the PM Manmohan Singh that the CBI and IT and ED was being used to frame Modi and Shah. In fact, when the BJP was in opposition, it had promised to make these agencies independent. But the moment it came to power in 2014, the parrot remained a parrot, just the shoulders changed.
Well, Mr. Gaurav Bhatia, you know, the public is watching and they know a simple addition of 2 plus 2.
You know, we are so glad that the public is watching, and the public is watching that from a government of the UPA which misused and abused CBI, ED, IT department, and the Honorable Supreme Court had to warn the government and phrase the term the caged parrot for CBI. Now the country is watching that Narendra Modi ji's government is giving a free hand to the investigating agencies, and they have become hawks who are biting the corrupt. I would first respond to Tehseen. Tehseen said that the argument given by me is that 2 wrongs would not make a right, and Indira Gandhi banned BBC, thus, you know, what we are doing is also justified. No, Tehseen. My argument was very simple. The argument was that Congress has no moral authority to question and prejudge an issue which is still pending and the survey is going on. Second, when you talked about Greater Kashmir, Quint, Print and other examples, I challenge you on Times Now. Can you show one judicial order of the High Court or the Supreme Court where the activity undertaken by the investigating agency has been found to be suffering with the vice of political vendetta? I challenge you, when your turn comes, you please answer.
Just
to my friend Anand, I would like to say, Anand bhai, it doesn't worry us when organizations like the BBC are anti-Modi, because Modi ji and Bharatiya Janata Party are strong enough to ensure that we win the confidence of the people, and we have been winning all throughout. But when such organizations become anti-India, definitely our agencies would not be mute spectators. You were asking us about what action has been taken. You rightly also answered it by giving an example of Amnesty India, who was after the action was taken, forced to shut their operation because they were spewing venom without any facts. And let me end by giving you an example how BBC is a habitual offender. They showed the India map without Kashmir. Once they were warned, they apologized, they corrected that mistake. It happened again in 2020 and 2021. So they are habitual offenders, and I don't think they are above law. Law is taking its own course until a court verdict comes. These allegations that have been made by the opposition itself show them in poor light and against our country.
Can I just respond in one line? Gaurav, two things. If they are doing something wrong with the map, or they are challenging the integrity of India, the territorial integrity of India, act under those laws, not under income tax survey. So that argument defeats itself. But to your question, the judicial order, Gaurav, you know very well, and everyone on this panel knows, the process is the punishment.
Yes,
over 10 journalists in Uttar Pradesh were jailed, some for showing your midday meal scams. The Supreme Court had to intervene to ask them to get released. The Supreme Court is routinely criticizing your government, and you are not doing anything about it. The process, Gaurav, is the punishment.
To your question.
He is responding.
One response to your question.
Yes.
Okay, one response, 10 seconds. Navika, very rightly said by Tehseen, he said the process itself is a punishment. Imagine Narendra Modi ji, he has been cleared by the Honorable Supreme Court, waited patiently for 2 decades, and still you do not accept the verdict. What kind of punishment is that? Can you please spell it out?
No, we accept.
Well, that's nobody does accept that verdict. But when you talk about the BBC's repeat offending, I just want to show you a few statements made by the BBC. Beaten and tortured by Indian Army. These are security forces in Kashmir. That's what BBC says. But on the other hand, look at them saying about Taliban, and they say Taliban बिना भारी खून खराबे के शहरों पर कब्जा कर कैसे लेता है? तो Taliban is probably kinder than Indian Army is the point BBC is trying to make. Not just that, it says भारत की GDP में बड़ा उछाल भी चिंताजनक है. If India's GDP rises, it is worrying, but for China, and we all know BBC is funding by China, कोरोना की मार के बीच चीन की अर्थव्यवस्था में जबरदस्त वृद्धि कैसे? So China should do it, China should do it, India suspect. Then it says coronavirus, lockdowns in Europe saved millions of lives. And then he says about the India case, India COVID-19, PM Modi did not consult before lockdown. So, he's on the mat, not for saving lives, but for not consulting people. And then about Deepavali, which is the most widely celebrated Hindu festival, they say, शोर और प्रदूषण से मुक्त शांत और सुंदर हो ऐसी दिवाली. This is what BBC says. And when they talk about New Year's Eve in London, they actually say New Year's Eve, hundreds of thousands gather for London fireworks. So fireworks in London create no pollution, but fireworks in Indian Diwalis create pollution. Just a little bit of an example, Dr. Sanjay Jha, about BBC. So my question to you is, why is the opposition batting for the BBC? Why? Number one. Number two, when you question the timing, my friend, why not question the timing of the BBC as well? Before every election, there is a BBC documentary that just comes up. 2002, what happened? The verdict is out, known to everybody, but just ahead of 2024, the same story comes in a documentary. I want to ask you, 24 elections prior to that, 2019 elections prior to that, 2014 elections prior to that. Why don't you question the timing of the BBC documentaries as well?
Navika, let me give you two short responses. Number one, I think all of us know here that the action taken against BBC today is directly correlated to the BBC documentary on the Gujarat riots, which apparently is a government document. It is of the British Foreign Office that said that Mr. Modi is directly responsible for the genocide that happened in Gujarat. If Gaurav Bhatia is to be believed, and the BJP is really so discredited, the BJP has zero credibility, the BJP is a third-rate media house, then my question to Gaurav Bhatia is, why are you so, in a panicky mode?
I think you
and
so not the
cornered.
BJP.
It doesn't make any sense. Why is the BJP looking so desperate? Why is the BJP looking so cornered and caged? I mean, that is frankly beyond my imagination. But the second point, very important. I have followed, Navika, several media outlets for a long period of my life. No organization is perfect. But I want to tell you with full responsibility on your program, if tomorrow this government, and it's capable of doing that because we all know this is an authoritarian government, this is a democratically elected dictatorship that we are actually living under. If they go after the time through, or they come after times now, trust me, I'll be the first person standing who will fight for you, and will also remain the last man standing. Because I believe the media and the fourth estate has a critical role to play in saving any democracy. Point number three, as far as the BBC is concerned, I can tell you this, the BBC, by the way, which is funded by the British taxpayer, is one of the biggest critiques of any establishment. They may be slightly more, shall we say, tolerant of the Labour because they may be slightly left-leaning, but they gave such a hard time to Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of Britain himself, that Mr. Johnson was very keen to defund the BJP. So this is an organization that actually is very anti-establishment by its very nature. So I really don't understand why the BJP, if it believes that the BBC, however, is pathetic, is puerile, is a pedestrian organization, don't waste your time. Let the world see what is there in the documentary. But they won't, because the timing for the BJP is actually hurting them. Adani and the BBC documentary is a double whammy for the Prime Minister himself. Because in both of these, it's the Prime Minister who happens to be the singular target. Now, you can be the Prime Minister. Mr. Modi can be Prime Minister for 50 years. But the truth is, your legacy is based on your past actions and not on your post alone. So I think this is the legitimate right of any democratic platform to question anybody. Just because Mr. Modi is a Prime Minister today, it doesn't make him God. And if tomorrow he's an ex-Prime Minister, it doesn't make us lose our respect in him either. So let's be very clear here. Politicians have feet to play. And anyone who questions them, any media that questions them, they need to be backed. And I have proof of that, Navika. My own party doesn't come on your program very often. I believe they're wrong. I am very proud to be on your program and on your channel because I believe any democratic platform needs to be heard.
Well, no wonder you're suspended as well. So much for democracy within your own party. But Dr. Sanjay Jha, may you also note the fact that Guardian has reported several times, and you're a widely read person, presenters of the BBC are facing tax evasion charges even from the UK government. And they have admitted that special tax vehicles should be made for them so that they can avoid paying millions in national insurance contributions. Also, BBC has been routinely pulled up for tax evasions by the UK government. But here they've found huge allies in the opposition, which is talking about this government going after them. So, Ishkaran Bhandari, my question.
Just a quick response to that. That is exactly the kind of democracy we need, Navika. Here you have a BBC, which apparently is, according to the BJP, left-leaning, questioned by the Guardian. It is, by the way, quite far left, if you ask me. So that is exactly what the conversation should be about. It's not a question about whether you're right or left.
Where is the problem? Where is the problem in India? People, people who don't agree with Modi are on our channel every night. Tehseen is here, you are here. So where is the problem? Where is the death of democracy? Anand Ranganathan is also raising his hand. Anand?
ये नाविका मेरा नाम भी ले लेते हैं तहसीन के साथ. No, but I'm saying while I applaud my good friend Dr. Sanjay Jha for saying that if something like that happened 2 times now, he would stand for it. I want to ask a very simple question to both my friends Sanjay as well as Tehseen. In 2009 and 2010, they were very much active members of the Congress under the UPA. Did they protest when the similar IT survey was conducted under the UP of the BBC? Did they? Yes or no? They were on Twitter as well. Did they? No, they didn't. So now when you bring up that issue, they will cry what about it? They will say 2 wrongs don't make a right. The fact is, when they were wielding power, they were silent. That is the question.
And let me also tell you, both under Finance Minister Mr. P. Chidambaram, if intimidation is how you call it, my income tax has been under so-called survey for 5 years, my friend, for 5 years. Only difference being that we didn't belong to a media which sat on the streets and said, hi democracy mar gayi, hi democracy mar gayi. We didn't do that. We did our job while one salary which went into your account, you had to hire chartered accountants to go and respond to several of the questions that were asked month after month, year after year. So Dr. Sanjay Jha, we didn't ask for help. We continued with our job, and we didn't think that this was intimidation or revenge. It's the other way around. People wear it on their sleeve almost as if it's a medal, and it's that ecosystem that I'm talking about, Ishkaran Bhandari. Is the ecosystem rattled only because a survey has been conducted under section 133A, which means they can go ask questions, and this is not a search or a raid. Even that is a problem in democratic India.
Navika ji, by giving your own example of how you were so-called surveyed by the finance ministry under UPA, you have killed the debate itself, because there they were targeting an individual journalist. Here it's a media house, and for an individual journalist to face it is 1,000 times worse and 1,000 times more intimidatory, though of course you did not get intimidated. In fact, the people
there was nothing to get intimidated, because there was nothing in the bank account other than EMIs, but that's fine.
But the attempt, that is the point. The attempt at an individual journalist is what they were trying to achieve. They did not achieve their aims. But let us come to this case in itself. Now the UK government can investigate BBC for tax evasion. In fact, they can investigate individual presentators for tax evasion. But Indian government, if it investigates, and it's not the first case, they have investigated Chinese firms, Oppo, Vivo, etc. also for the same reasons, that the transfer pricing is happening, that they are undervaluing or overvaluing the bills and services from outside India. So the Indian government has, or the income tax authorities have realized this problem in the world of globalization, where different countries are evading taxes in India and different entities are evading taxes in India. So that's a very normal procedure to do, which they are doing. But of course, because you cannot answer on facts, you have to say that it isn't targeting of an organization happening. Though of course, let us be very clear about this, because the investigations do not lead to logical conclusions and convictions and penalties and fines, they get the chance to do so, raise the question of timing. But India is a land where every few months you have elections. We just got through massive midterm elections of 2021, then 22, then now we will have 10 elections this year. So anytime the government takes action, they will call it some timing or the other, but that does not mean that you do not investigate things which need to be investigated. And one last point, I do not know why that was banned, because that's a very separate issue, and I have said many times that the ban of BBC documentary was wrong. In fact, it has made more people watch it than would have watched it. Nobody would have watched it. But if there is a tax evasion, that is documentary, that is financial issues, that definitely has to be investigated.
Mr. Sanjay Hegde, is it a routine survey investigation which has turned into a political circus?
Well, thank you, Navika, for finally coming to me. And before I begin,
well, there is a member of the BRS still waiting. So,
yeah. Okay, a very happy cow hug day to all, including the panel.
Depends on who you are calling the cow.
No, I'm not trying to derail the debate. The point is simply this, that as far as the Modi government is concerned, it has more to fear from its friends than from its opponents. Nobody, as so many of your panelists said, nobody would have watched the BBC debate, the BBC documentary. But the banning and now this action will make more people want to see it all over. You mentioned the Guardian and what it said about the BBC. How is the Guardian reporting it today? And the Guardian is not India's opposition. The Guardian says BBC offices in India raided by tax officials amid Modi documentary fallout. Whatever happens, their linkage is more or less established in the public mind and in the international mind. Now, what will it tell the international investors and the others about systems in India? That there is a strong man. If you annoy the strong man, then even so-called independent institutions can come after you. Somebody was also mentioning how the Congress reacted to the BBC.
Navika,
you know, it's an irony of history that when Mrs. Indira Gandhi was assassinated, Rajiv Gandhi had to turn to the BBC to know for sure what had happened in Delhi. It is the credibility that the BBC commands which is still not lost. And by all means, go ahead, survey.
Credibility, Sanjay Hegde, credibility. It's 2003 report on WMD and the following attacks in Iraq, in which they literally, there was a war because of what they reported, and then they only apologized 6 years later, 2009, after a war and after the killing of several people on every single side. You're saying they still have credibility? I mean, I wish you were that magnanimous to Indian media houses as well.
Even today, if you go into the villages, something has to be checked, they will say BBC pe aaya hai, whether you like it or you don't like it. So I gave you that example of Rajiv Gandhi also turning in to the channel, to the radio on BBC.
So because Rajiv Gandhi turns into a channel, then therefore that is the most credible channel, despite what happened in 2003. I'm coming to all of you, but my friend Karthik Reddy hasn't spoken. So Gaurav Bhatia, I'll just go to Karthik Reddy first, and then you can respond to everybody who has raised questions. And Karthik Reddy, there is an anti-India slant. There has been an anti-India slant by the BBC, not just in the BJP period, even before that, the Congress has complained over that. The question is, just at the mere mention of the word survey, the opposition in India is up in arms, and once again, democracy is dead, press freedom is dead, are the calls that are coming in. Are you jumping to conclusions is what I'm asking. Should you not wait for the verdict? Or at least for details?
Hello Navika ji. Thank you for finally letting me speak. Anyway, at the onset, let me be very clear. Let me distance myself and my party. We are not here to take the side of the BBC. We are not the spokesperson of BBC to hoots with what happens with that organization, and if it was surveyed, probed, raided, we do not care. The problem is the stand taken by BBC is not anti-India. It might be anti-India, but my worry is the stand taken by BJP is anti-India. Let me tell you why I say this. Navika ji, from the last 15-20 days, India is under scanner by many organizations, news organizations, government organizations, international, national. Everybody is looking into India, and we all know the reasons. One, of course, the BBC's documentary, and the second part is obviously the Adani's whole mess. And my issue today is when Gaurav kind of said twice that the agencies under the Honorable Prime Minister are free to work. No, Gaurav, they are not free to work. In the last 9 years, they've been hostage under the BJP. And let me tell you why I say this. Navika ji, the problem with the BJP that we have right now in this issue is BJP is turning India into a constructive, mature democracy into a banana republic. विश्व गुरु को हिंदुस्तान को विश्व गुरु नहीं, विश्व का जोकर बना रहे बीजेपी. The reason I say this is BJP today is the IT, CBI, ED, they're all run by BJP. This is a direct allegation that we are making. BBC today is probed because of transfer pricing, whereas Adani transferred money into stocks from offshore accounts, and that's not probed, that's ignored completely. Tax evasion is done by BJP, it's probed, good. Adani, there's an allegation of black money routing into his stocks, and that is not probed. BBC has done unauthorized business in India, and that should be probed, all right. But Adani can take over hostile business, hostile take over many businesses, and that should be completely ignored. This is the problem.
All right, Gaurav Bhatia responds. Litany of charges against Gaurav Bhatia and his party BJP. Allow him to respond.
You know, it's very heartening that this debate is being very well watched by the entire country. The BJP is saying that rule of law should prevail, the IT department should be allowed to do its job, and nobody is above the law of the country. But in this panel on your debate, Navika, what I've heard so far, Sanjay Bhai, who is here, who is a colleague of mine, said, जो लिंक है बीबीसी और सर्वे का वो इस्टेब्लिश हो गया है, सो ही बिकम्स द कोर्ट एंड ही गिव्स अ वर्डिक्ट, वो लिंक भी इस्टेब्लिश है. देन ही गोज ऑन टू से बीबीसी की क्रेडिबिलिटी तो है. टू हिम आई वुड लाइक टू से यू आर एंटाइटल्ड टू योर ओपिनियन, बट फॉर बिलियन ऑफ इंडियन it is the BBC which has been acting against the interest of the country. And I want to ask you a simple question. Whether it is the Adani issue, if you really feel and you are so convinced some wrongdoing has been done, number one, somebody from the Congress party also can move the court and get an order of CBI investigation or an SIT. The matter is now sub judice before the Honorable Supreme Court. So you should have faith in the Honorable Supreme Court. Second, the Congress party, where it has its government in Chhattisgarh, in Rajasthan, also in Jharkhand, there are contracts and agreements with the Adani group. If he is so dubious and he is so corrupt, why don't you forthwith cancel all the contracts? This is the duplicity. You know, they would not cancel the contracts, they will do business with him, but they will blame the government. Last but not the least, Navika, BBC is saying we are cooperating with the IT department. सर्वे हो रहा है, धुआं कांग्रेस पार्टी के दफ्तर में क्यों हो रहा है? क्या कांग्रेस पार्टी knows better than the BBC itself what stand they have to take in the survey and the queries that have been made by the IT department? This only shows that their hatred for Modi far exceeds the love that they have for our country. They have no faith in the Supreme Court.
Dr. Sanjay Jha raising his hand, Tehseen raising his hand. Dr. Sanjay Jha, you know, people will today find this so ironical. The party that brought in retrospective taxation, they are worried about FDI in India, foreign investments in India. कमाल करते हो भाई संजय झा.
नाविका, दो छोटे अंकों में मैं जवाब देना चाहूंगा. सबसे पहले गौरव भाटिया, on Adani the big issue is who owns their offshore tax havens, because those funds are investing only in Adani stocks. You don't have to be a genius, even a child will tell you that is a case of share price manipulation. Anyway, the second point.
The matter is
Yeah. Okay, no, 1 minute.
Have faith in the judiciary of the country.
It is also, excuse me, if you have so much of faith in the systems of the country,
So
appoint a JPC.
do you have faith in
appoint
the
a JPC,
judiciary of the
even the
country or
BJP
you
will be part of the JPC. Why are you scared? What are you trying to hide?
You don't have faith in the Supreme Court? The Congress leaders, first of all, you do not represent the Congress anymore. The Congress party itself said
Tell the people of India on Times Now. Why are you scared?
Probe.
Why is the Prime Minister scared? What are you trying to hide?
Reading the newspaper.
Well, rhetoric will get you everywhere in the elections, but
only one line.
What is your one line?
Only one line to Gaurav Bhatia, just one line. In 2013, a very wise man said while campaigning that all Indian news channels should raise to the standard of BBC. That man was एक अकेला सब पे भारी नरेंद्र मोदी जी. वो तब मिसलीड हो गए या आज मिसलीड हो गए? इसका उत्तर आप प्लीज दे दीजिए.
बोल रहे हो, फिर से झूठ बोल रहे हो.
चला दीजिए मोदी जी का बाइट.
That wise man said that these people have faith in the BBC but not in Doordarshan and Prasar Bharati.
तो BBC में था ना, मोदी जी ने तारीफ की ना.
The person that he was talking about.
तो जिस BBC में फेथ है, आज फेथ है तो संजय हेगड़े इज राइट.
Investigating agency of the country.
Well, the question tonight is only this, and Anand Ranganathan, my question to you is, have they ever fought for any other media house and its, and its values or attack on its various issues like they are fighting for the BBC? Touche.
No,
why don't we Indian companies get the same kind of support? हमें तो बैन कर दिया था 9 साल के लिए कांग्रेस पार्टी ने, आते ही नहीं थे.
No, Navika, they have fought for a media house, but unfortunately that media house has been bought by Adani now. तो करे तो क्या करे? जाए तो जाए कहाँ? वाह मोदी जी वाह.
हिपोक्रेसी की कोई सीमा होती है.
Well, so what happens to that democracy, Mr. Karthik Reddy? What happens to that democracy? When opposition parties stop talking to Indian media houses but feel the pain of BBC?
See, at the beginning itself, I kind of made it clear that I do not want to take sides of the BBC today, but I want to ask Gaurav 3 straight questions. There have been allegations of stock buffing. There have been allegations of black money routing. There have been allegations of profits and losses misquoting. Of Adani, this is not BBC. Which court has asked you to probe BBC, and who is asking you not to probe Adani? The country wants to know. Then you kind of deflect everything
straightforward question. Straightforward question. I need a straightforward response, and the response that the matter is sub judice is not enough. Why can't the government be proactive in this case, just as it is in the BBC case? That's the question.
Gauravji, 5 seconds. Can you give me 5 seconds, Gauravji? I beg of you.
Exactly. Navika ji, straightforward answer I will give. Anand bhai, just a sec. Navika ji, you are always very well conversant with the facts. Do you know what has transpired in the Supreme Court? The government has said that we are constituting a committee and the names have to be forwarded to the Honorable Supreme Court. It's the government stand. We are not treating it as an adversary. So please know the facts. And second, SEBI has spoken, the finance minister has spoken, SBI has spoken, LIC has spoken. Now it is for these agencies, especially the SEBI, to decide whether something illegal has been done or not. It is not for the Congress to pass a judgment. Please,
all right.
That
should satisfy the opposition. Anand Ranganathan. Yes, Anand.
Yes. No. To my good friend Mr. Karthik of BRS, I just want to say one thing. You see, it is the normal procedure in law. Everyone would back me up on that. That if you allege something, and want investigation against someone, then you suspend every interaction with that person. So will on record Mr. Karthik say that till such time Mr. Adani is investigated, we are going to hold or suspend our 5,000 crore investment that Adani has in our state. Just say we suspend every project running Adani project in Telangana. Say it.
Here, see, here's the case. May I come in, Navika? The Adani investment in Telangana happened by acquisition. It was not done by, the government did not help him to get whatever investment.
That's exactly what the BJP is saying. That what they've got is through tendering. That's exactly what the BJP is saying. कमाल है. Well, Ishkaran Bhandari, the cat is out of the bag. The cat is out of the bag. Tehseen Poonawala in the Congress.
It is free market. It is free market if Adani invests in any non-BJP state, but it is government action if Adani invests in a BJP state. अब इसका भी क्या जवाब दे सकता है? इंडिया में 2 इकोनॉमिक सिस्टम्स चल रहे हैं इनके हिसाब से.
Let's investigate. Let's get it out right. Let's get an investigation. Let's get a probe in.
You are the state resources. Take action. Why investigate? Just take action. You are the state resources. He's operating in your state.
I'll explain that, Ishkaran. I'll explain that.
Does the central government allow an investigation into an Adani group?
No, but what about Rajasthan? What about Rajasthan? Land has been given. There is no bidding there.
Yes.
There is no bidding there. Then
so there are two.
File a FIR and suspend all projects.
I'll answer that, Anand, if you allow me to. Sure. Can I answer it?
Yes.
Thank you.
Should those projects be suspended? Yes or no? Why?
No. And I'll answer it why state governments are right and central government is wrong. Because state governments have given something based upon what only is in the domain of the central government to investigate whether these funds have come into India illegally. That neither Telangana can do, neither Rajasthan can do.
If you are wanting the truth to come out, then why don't you stop? Why don't you put pressure on the center? Moral pressure, my friend, but morality in politics, well, that is asking for too much. Morality and politics cannot go together. And while the opposition cries vendetta when it comes to BBC, I don't know why everybody is calling BBC as BJP, but just as they keep calling vendetta on action on the BBC, the question is, when it comes to Adani, they want investigation. They want a little leeway in their hands, but they don't want to stop doing business with the group. What does this mean? Is it only about rhetoric and doublespeak in politics? That's a question all parties, and whether they are on the treasury benches or on the opposition benches, that's what people of India are going to judge them on. Who'll come out the winner? We'll wait and watch. Thank you very much to all my panelists for joining me on this big debate on the Newshour tonight. Good night. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you tomorrow, same time, same show, the Newshour at 9.
हमारे साथ मौजूद हैं मोहुल, who's founder and CEO of Matter. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So Mohul, we've already seen this bike. I still don't know what you guys going to call it right now, but hopefully, we're going to know about it in a couple of months, I believe, and more details that we already know about specifications and what you are offering with this bike. But उसके अलावा कुछ और चीज़ें हैं जिनकी डिटेल्स अभी आनी बाकी हैं. So इस बाइक को लेकर थोड़ा टाइमलाइन, इफ यू कैन एक्सप्लेन किस तरह का टाइमलाइन रहने वाला है एंड कब इसका ऑफिशियली लॉन्च आप करने वाले हैं.
Definitely. So first thing is at the Auto Expo we have also showcased the 6 kilowatt version of the bike. So at launch we had a 5 kilowatt version. Now we also have a 6 kilowatt version of the bike. And in terms of timeline, in the next 30 days we will be giving out the spec variants and pricing to the larger market. We will be opening up bookings for the Matter motorbike this quarter, and deliveries summer में शुरू हो जाने वाली है.
शुरू हो जाएंगी. So एक चीज़ जो बहुत ही टेक्नोलॉजी का हूँ इंटरेस्टिंग है इस बाइक के बारे में, इसमें गियर है. इलेक्ट्रिक बाइक होने के साथ साथ इसमें वो आइस वाला आपने एसेंस और बहुत बड़ा एसेंस इसमें बचा के रखा है. सो वो कैसे आपने उस पर काम किया एंड हाउ डिड यू थॉट अबाउट दिस कि ये अगर हम इसमें इंक्लूड कर पाते हैं गियर शिफ्ट वाला पैटर्न, सो वो कैसे स्टार्ट हुआ? वो
So when we in 2019 when we were starting out, we spoke to a lot of consumers कि इलेक्ट्रिक बाइक क्यों नहीं खरीद. And then in 2019, there were only a handful of players who were giving motorcycles as a product. And what we realized is that motorcycling is emotion driven. You name your bike, you work with it, you control it, you become one with your bike. And from there, the common theme came, control nahi mil raha, feel nahi aa rahi. And obviously, once we started translating कि हमें क्या सुनाई दे रहा है और कस्टमर को क्या चाहिए, and we've spoken to over 500 customers on this. Clear indication, gear तो चाहिए. And that's when we said कि let's make something that the consumers truly want. ऐसा नहीं कि जो टेक्नोलॉजी है उसी को वापस पैकेज करके दे देते हैं. Let's make it. तो वहाँ से when the
Union Home Minister Amit Shah says BJP has no competition for the upcoming general elections next year and Prime Minister Modi enjoys massive public support. Shah dismisses immediate threat from Khalistanis, however, says that the agencies are maintaining a close watch on such outfits in India and abroad. On the PFI ban, Home Minister says that the government banned the outfit, rising above vote bank politics as PFI promotes radicalism and religious bigotry. As the Adani issue rages on, Home Minister says his government or the party doesn't fear anything as they have nothing to hide on the issue. Opposition continues its attack on central government, says Prime Minister Modi is rattled by Rahul Gandhi's pointed questions on Adani in the parliament. Air India has inked a deal with Airbus to acquire 250 aircraft. Prime Minister Modi hails Air India Airbus deal, says many opportunities are opening up for India in the field of aerospace. Delhi High Court stays Mehrauli demolition drive against illegal construction till February 16th. Cops recover body of a girl stored inside a fridge at a dhaba in Delhi's Harinagar. In a shocking display of VVIP racism, Kerala cops stop a man out to buy medicines for his ailing kid to make way for the CM's convoy. Kerala High Court seeks DGP's reply on the issue.
आ चुका है पोको X5 Pro का बॉक्स टेबल पे. अब इसको जल्दी से करेंगे अनबॉक्स. ब्लैक और येलो कलर का ये बॉक्स है, जो ज्यादातर पोको के स्मार्टफोन पे आपको येलो कलर, जो इसका सिग्नेचर कलर है, वो दिखाई देगा. Sometimes it is really tricky to take the tapes off, so let me try it with my nails. One tape down successfully. गाइज, ये जो फीलिंग है ना अनबॉक्स करने वाली, ये काफी ही मजेदार लगती है. जब भी आप कोई नया गैजेट अनबॉक्स करते हैं तो मजा तो आता है. जैसे कि यहाँ देखेंगे, बॉक्स के पीछे की तरफ बहुत सारे डिटेल्स लिखे हैं, बॉक्स के बारे में फीचर्स लिखे हैं, वो दिखाएंगे और उसके बारे में बात करेंगे जब फोन हाथ में आ जाएगा. इनसाइड द बॉक्स यू गेट दिस लिटिल पेपर बॉक्स एज वेल, जिसमें ज्यादातर पेपर वर्क और प्रोटेक्टिव केस ही होता है. लाइक आई सेड, वही मिला है हमको. यहाँ पर एक छोटा सा मैनुअल टाइप है. यहाँ पर फोन को प्रोटेक्ट करने के लिए आपको मिलता है ट्रांसपेरेंट प्रोटेक्टिव केस, और साथ में सिम इजेक्टर टूल, विच इज वेरी बेसिक. अब मुझे बॉक्स के अंदर दिखाई दे रहा है हमारा डिवाइस, जिसके बारे में ये वीडियो बना रहे हैं. उफ, वेरी वाइब्रेंट एंड पेपी येलो कलर. Just like the box, the smartphone also boasts the combination of black, or call it dark grey, along with yellow.
Hello and welcome. You're
You're watching the Newshour agenda. I'm Padmaja Joshi. Almost a month after first installment of BBC docu-series The Modi Question hit the airways, income tax officials landed up at the offices of the British broadcaster in Delhi and Mumbai. The IT department said that the searches were part of a tax evasion investigation into the business operations of the BBC in India and was a routine exercise not to be confused with raids. While the broadcaster issued a statement saying they were cooperating with the probe and the matter will be sorted soon. But given the timing and given that the BBC has been critical of the government in a recent documentary, the opposition is saying that this is nothing more than an attempt to silence, intimidate and punish.
यहाँ हम जेपीसी की मांग कर रहे हैं अडानी के मामले में और वहाँ सरकार बीबीसी के पीछे पड़ी हुई है। विनाशकाले विपरीत बुद्धि।
अगर कुछ गलत किया नहीं है, कानून का पालन किया है, तो फिर डर कैसा? बीबीसी के अगर कृत्य देखें तो यह पूरे विश्व की सबसे भ्रष्ट बकवास कॉरपोरेशन हो गई है। और दुख की बात यह है कि बीबीसी का प्रोपेगेंडा और कांग्रेस का एजेंडा एक साथ मेल खाता है।
You're watching the News Hour at 10, debate number 1 on Times Now, Super Prime Time.
All right, joining us on the debate, we have Deshratan Nigam lawyer, Sushil Pandit activist, Kamar Zaman Chaudhary, leader of the Congress, and A. Sarvanan, spokesperson of the DMK. I want to start with you, Mr. Nigam. How can the timing not be declared suspect? Here you have the BBC documentary being released, and within a few months, suddenly there is a tax survey. Are you saying there's no connection?
Well, let me tell you, as the information is filtering out, the warning to BBC has been given since a very long time back. And it is much prior to the release of the documentary. And therefore, could it not be a theory that the release of the BBC documentary could be a preemptive strike to prevent the income tax investigation, which probably the warning started much before than the release of documentary. So therefore, it could also be a preemptive move on the part of BBC to prevent and to play a victim card finally. And today what they have said in a published article that they are cooperating with the income tax authorities. On the other hand, they are imputing the timing because they are saying it is because we made a documentary on BBC. These two things cannot go together.
Okay,
Either you
Mr.
cooperate
Sarvanan,
and
Deshratan
then
Nigam has turned the argument on its head, saying that instead of the survey happening because of the documentary, maybe the documentary was brought out preempting the survey.
See, the Income Tax Department, the CBI and ED should have there at the Adani's offices, not in the BBC's offices. And our leader, Mr. M.K. Stalin, has hit out that this government is so brazenly attacking the Indian democracy. They are misusing the mandate of the people. This is a farcical, clearly farcical. The only way the BJP can redeem itself is by letting out on what premises they wanted to raid the BBC offices and why they snatched away the mobile phones of the journalists there. Done only, and they should come out with the details.
So you're calling it a raid, sir. You're calling it a raid. Here is what the Income Tax Department had to say. They are very categorical. It is pertinent to note the above exercise conducted by tax authorities is a survey, not search raid as per the provisions of the Income Tax Act. Such surveys are routinely conducted and are not to be confused to be in the nature of a search or a raid. They have very emphatically said this is not a raid, it's a survey and it's routine.
Yeah. Yes, routine, fine. Let them give out the details. What have they found out in the survey? Then only the Indian democracy can stand proud on the world stage. On the one hand, we take pride in the fact that we are having the presidency and the BJP is attributing to this to the Prime Minister. Let them do that, no problem.
Actually, it is fairly easy to find out, sir. Not only this government, past governments, for example, sir, during the UPA's tenure, I'm sure you're well aware, there was IT notices sent to the BBC in 2009. It was related to tax reassessment that was from 2002-2003. Ultimately, yes, it was quashed by the Delhi High Court, but these notices were sent. In 2009 they were sent, in 2010 they were also sent.
Yes.
So this is not their first run-in with the IT department.
But at the time, the BBC did not. But at those times, the BBC did not produce any documentary on UPA, on Manmohan Singh or anybody else. Now they have produced a documentary, a damning documentary, which the BJP government, the Modi government, they totally banned it. They were afraid.
At that time,
they were so scared.
the IT notice was legitimate because there was no documentary.
They were inventing lies.
So that time the IT search was, IT survey was legit.
I'm saying the image that now the Indian government, the Modi government has created is that India is not for freedom of press. They will throttle, they will muzzle the press. That is the image this raid has sent out.
Sushil Pandit makes you look like a banana
on the
democracy.
international stage wants to improve his stature and spokes about. Absolutely.
Looks like a banana republic. Sushil Pandit.
I want to know how many media organizations have been squashed, destroyed, pummeled by ED or income tax raids, and they have shut shutters and gone out of business. It's been 8 years of this government. I would like to know one media organization that has shut shop, has stopped printing, publishing. NDTV is thriving. NDTV did not shut shop. Did not shut shop.
Thriving.
Did not shut shop. I'm saying which organization has shut shop?
Under whom? Under whom it is thriving?
What are you saying? What are you saying?
Modi's friend.
Did once.
So are you saying, sir, Mr. Saravanan, you have unilaterally declared every journalist who is working in NDTV as a non-journalist? Because of the change in management, they cease to be journalists.
Incredible.
Have en masse all of them been discredited?
I was answering it.
Incredible.
He was asking a question. He was asking
who's shut shop. The fact is that organization is still working, maybe not under the management that you like, approve and certify, but it is functioning.
You have sent Pranay Rai out of business. You have sent Pranay Rai out of business.
Sir, again, I do not want to address individuals or talk about individuals who are not here, but they got a substantial amount of money and voluntarily sold. But anyway, this is not about that particular deal. The fact is, sir, that here you have action which was taken in the past,
make my point,
and it continues. Sushil Pandit, finish your point. Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Well, all said and done, it is right that sometimes timings, even if that is not the intent, even if that was not the part of the plan, does give a handle to the detractors to sell a story to a world waiting to jump to conclusions. So if income tax department had to do things, surveys, they could have probably chosen a better time and a better method instead of giving grist to the mills that this government here is sitting with a sledgehammer to squash everyone out of business who even has a temerity to raise a little finger.
All right. So at best, what you have right now, Mr. Chaudhary, is some really bad timing. It's bad timing for these surveys to take place.
No, I won't call it. Yeah, I won't call it a bad timing, Padmaja. The basic point is that it's very obvious, India at the time when it is taking over the G20 presidency, do we need to project ourselves rightly, as Van Damme has said, as an electoral autocracy? By raiding the offices of the BBC, this is nothing new to the BJP government. They've done it with amnesty, they've done it with Oxfam. These are not institutions that have been kicked out of India for whatever reasons best known to the government. Then you have got individuals like Siddiq Kappan, journalist. You have got journalists like Rana Ayub, journalists like Saket Gokel behind the bars. Yesterday it was all those people. Today it is the BBC. tomorrow it will be Padmaja Joshi. So all the media people now today, it seems, should have been in solidarity with such an action on a premium business, on a news organization of the world.
Actually, what is interesting, sir, what is interesting, if you're saying that any kind of action against a company makes you look like an autocracy, there was a documentary of the BBC that was banned when the Congress was in government. It was known as India's Daughter, and it was in the aftermath of the Delhi gang rape when the Congress was in government at the center and in Delhi, and a documentary on a woman's rape and the conditions around it was banned. Why? It was a BBC documentary, Mr. Chaudhary. Did you look like an autocracy then?
Yeah, Padmaja, can I answer this?
Yeah. No, good question, Padmaja. You know, the BJP has won elections after this, citing all those instances. They went against the Congress government to the public, saying that India had imposed Indira Gandhi had imposed the emergency, so this is all an autocracy, a dictatorship. They won successive elections. Now, after all these things, do you expect the BJP to again go back into those issues?
All right. So you're saying that at that time it may have seemed autocratic and you were punished for it. Deshratan Nigam. Now here's the thing. Okay, before you come in, Mr. Sarnan. Okay, make your point, Mr. Sarnan. Then I'll bring in Deshratan Nigam.
No, the same thing. I just wanted to say the same thing. Then what is the difference between the BJP and the Congress? You are accusing Congress has done the same thing. This is whataboutery.
No, it's not whataboutery. Okay, so I'm glad at least there is an acceptance that the Congress is as autocratic as the BJP or as democratic as the BJP, and you are in government with them in Tamil Nadu as well. All right, so we're basically putting everyone at the same level. But that being said, Deshratan Nigam, now here's the thing. There have been multiple actions, such surveys, which have been carried out against multiple organizations. Let me quote a few. It happened on the Quint in October 2018. It happened in NDTV in 2017. Newsclick, February 2021. Dainik Bhaskar, July 2021. Bharat Samachar, July 2021. And ultimately it seems, and it happened with News Laundry, where a similar IT survey was carried out. Now, without getting into the merits of each case, it just leaves people in doubt about the intent because we never know the outcome. News Laundry in 2021 was surveyed. What happened to that survey?
Padmaja, in fact, let me tell you, nobody is above the law, whether it is News Laundry or BBC. BBC may be a big brand, but United Kingdom is suffering because of BBC's brushing under the carpet Islamist terrorism. And recently a report also came, and BBC never used to highlight such things. Today it has become a big problem. So, this one-sided, covering of events is something which BBC is known for. You saw Leicester and Birmingham. They blamed Hindus for it when the Pakis had attacked the Hindus out there after the match. And if this kind of things happen, then the credibility of BBC is certainly gone. It was once upon a time some kind of a brand. But if you violate the law, believe me, whether it is Washington Post, New York Times or NDTV or anybody, they will be dealt with. And let me make a distinction out here. These are companies incorporated under the respective Companies Act in their own countries. Journalists are separate from the company. Please understand. Journalists perform their duties as a journalist. When the companies registered under the Companies Act violate company rules, the company laws or the income tax laws related to the companies, then they will be taken care of and the action will be initiated against them.
Chaudhary responding to you.
Padmaja, I need to come in once, 10 seconds. Sir, Padmaja, I believe your ownership with this Bennett and Coleman, if I am not wrong, it is also registered under a Class 25 company of the MCA Act. Now, there is no parallel between what BBC's ownership is or Times Now's ownership is. This is hypothetical in the sense that you need to muzzle the press just because they released a documentary critical of your
but sir, the Prime Minister of India. At this point is your assumption. Let me again point out to you, sir, that very specifically in the statement today it has been said that in the case of BBC, there has been persistent non-compliance with the above-mentioned rule for years. As a result, several notices have been issued. However, they have been continuously defiant and non-compliant and has significantly diverted their profits, Mr. Chaudhary. So one, this is not a first-time occurrence. Second, multiple notices have been issued. Third, they have been progressively non-compliant.
Listen, Padmaja, I am here not as a spokesperson of the BBC, nor do I intend to defend the BBC's action with non-tax compliance.
But sir, you started out by declaring that they were completely innocent and any action was born out of malified. So you have been a spokesperson.
I stand by that. Padmaja, I stand by that. But the basic point that I wanted to drive here tonight is not that this only fact. The only fact is the perception that is there within weeks
but
of
sir,
releasing the BBC document.
perception is not reality. I mean, you can perceive that the sky is black, but that doesn't make it black.
Perception based out here. No, then the second question comes here, Padmaja. Second question that I want to put out here: such a thousands and thousands of crores of alleged fraud has been committed by Adani, but has any of the tax authorities, the SEBI or the NIA or any XYZ agencies visited their doorsteps?
Sushil Pandit,
this might be a case of alleged tax fraud by the BBC. Then why?
I'll bring you in, Mr. Saravanan. Sushil Pandit, yes.
60 to 70% have to visit news houses.
Padmaja.
Do you want to draw a parallel between this and the PS?
Sir, by the way, the case of Adani has gone right up to the Supreme Court, where exactly that was sought, and the Supreme Court refused. Supreme Court basically said we'll form a committee. So the Supreme Court, if it wanted an ED investigation, could have well ordered it. They only said form a committee, and the regulator needs to be strengthened. So it's not as if this issue hasn't been flagged up, demanding exactly this. Sushil Pandit.
Let me just
Padmaja, like any other business, media is also a business, and media business cannot seek any kind of immunity over and above the law just because it is in media business. It doesn't give it any privilege to violate law or to avoid any kind of survey or supervision from the law. Number two, even if BBC is Her Majesty's media service, India is no longer a Raj. It cannot claim any immunity or sorry.
The blind eye to all this the government has
No.
been doing.
And it is time that political spokespersons do not make reckless allegations and reckless speculation and undermine the institutions of the country in the process of scoring political brownie points.
Mr. Saravanan, so here's the thing that you have given a clean chit to an organization. Again, let us be very clear, this is a subject of investigation and the timing has been brought into question. But it's not as if the same organization hasn't been, one, penalized, two, forced to apologize, three, been under scrutiny in many other countries. For example, the BBC had to pay damages to ex-producer over Martin Bashir's Princess Diana interview. This happened in 22. In January 2023, they apologized for a sexist headline on Jacinda Ardern's resignation. In September 2015, they apologized to Hadid over Qatar's allegations. Then they had in 2012 apologized for broadcasting documentaries made by a firm being paid millions by PR clients. So PR was run as a documentary on BBC. They had to apologize for it. So yes, countries have put them under scrutiny and they've had to apologize. Why should India be any different?
Yes. Yes, we are not here to sing paeans to BBC. We are here to protect the image of India as a democracy. This is what that is at problem here. This is what that is problematic here. This you have read out a list of places where the income tax has gone ahead. In the world press freedom ranking, where does India stand? Has it not gone down in the last 10 years? This apart, they say, oh, there is no immunity for anybody. Whoever commits wrong will be punished. Please go ahead, sir. With the same kind of enthusiasm, go against the Adani group. So many allegations on the public sphere. All of them are prima facie true. They cannot be refuted.
How do you know they are prima facie true?
Is happening.
You should by all means go and file an FIR against the Adani group, just like people have gone to court. And again, let me remind you.
Yes. Yeah, Padmaja, this is not how anything operates in our country. It is the duty of the Indian country, duty of the bureaucracy to go. Sir,
why should Marans be insulated? Why should they be immune?
We have got acquitted.
What happened to Sun TV? What happened to Maran's business? What happened to SpiceJet business? What happened to Telecom?
The 2G The BJP
acquitted? Did you ask the question why wasn't the CBI judge's decision challenged in the High Court? Why wasn't there an appeal in the High Court? Why wasn't there an appeal in the Supreme Court? Did you ask the question? Why didn't the government go to appeal?
Yes, the judge said.
Why didn't they go to appeal in 2G case?
Coming to it.
Did you ask that question?
I know you will.
Did you ask that question?
I know.
Why wasn't Judge
I know, sir. You will get excited.
In High Court?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let him answer. Mr. Saravanan, yes.
You will get excited. Yes, I know you will. Yes, I know you will get excited when I take Adani's name, because the violations, the offences that seems to have been committed are so gross. They have taken the Indian public for a royal ride. Indian public funds have been taken for a royal ride.
Okay.
The BJP is silent. The Home Minister has got the temerity to say, oh, you go approach the Supreme Court, you go approach the court, then why do we have CBI and ED?
Okay, here's the thing, sir. Here's the thing, that you on the one hand as a political party are demanding raids on a company despite the fact that there is no apparent complaint against them at present and the matter is sub judice. But when a survey happens on another company, you call it the crushing of democracy and the end of freedom of speech. That cannot be a consistent stand. That being said, if this survey has happened, what are the problems that emerged? What are the details of what the IT department found must also be revealed to the public to keep their faith intact. On that note, thank you very much all gentlemen for joining me. We'll continue to keep a close eye on this story. But let me also bring in now, in fact, a Member of Parliament in the UK, Bob Blackman, somebody who's been very vocal, in particular about the BBC and also about the questions increasingly being raised about the organisation. All right, it's a pleasure to have with us in our studio. We have a Member of Parliament in the UK from Harrow East, Bob Blackman. Thank you very much, sir, for speaking to us. Are you enjoying your India visit?
So far, so good.
I can't say the same for BBC, though, because quite coincidentally today, even as we speak, on the day there are searches being conducted on the offices of the BBC in multiple cities, a lot of people are wondering whether this is an effort to intimidate. How do you read the situation?
Well, obviously the Indian authorities must investigate any allegations of fraud or income tax evasion. That's a matter for the Indian authorities. I'm obviously not in a position to comment on whether there's any evidence or any concerns, but clearly there must be some reason behind the searches, and I trust that will be resolved very quickly.
Now, it's not just, and you've been one of the people who's been very frank when it comes to allegations against the BBC. This action aside, there have been protests against the channel in the UK itself, largely by the Indian diaspora, alleging that there is an inherent bias. What do you make of such protests?
Well, we've recently had this so-called documentary shown on the BBC, which was completely, a complete hatchet job on Prime Minister Narendra Modi and on the Indian government in general. It misrepresented everything that I know about India because it sought to tie in the fact that Prime Minister Modi, when he was Chief Minister of Gujarat, and of course the Gujarat riots occurred, that somehow, shape or form, that he did nothing to actually prevent them from happening, and almost that he encouraged them. Now, that contradicts the evidence of the judicial review that was conducted by the Indian Supreme Court, and that was almost dismissed. Equally, so the whole programme was completely biased, poorly researched, and in my view, shoddy journalism. That was commissioned by the BBC, by an outside organisation, but actually edited by the BBC, and I think it was irresponsible to show that. The second part of that documentary attacked modern India and suggested that in somehow, shape or form, that minorities were in danger in India. Well, as we all know, India is a secular country where people of all races and religions are welcome, and indeed their religions are celebrated. So to attack India on that basis, I think, was giving a misrepresentation of modern India and sought, I think, to drive a wedge between the United Kingdom and India, and I think that's quite wrong. At the moment, we've signed, obviously, between the UK and India, a cooperation agreement on many aspects of security, defence, and other cooperation, and we are negotiating a free trade deal, which will be immensely valuable for both the United Kingdom and for India. And so, for the BBC to put something like this on was, I think, very poorly timed and indeed poorly researched.
It's a very interesting and important point you made. You said that this not only is a hatchet job, but maybe an attempt to try and damage the relationship between the two countries. Now, people will argue why. Why would the BBC do that? What would they possibly gain?
Well, the BBC is of course independent from government. The government doesn't control the BBC, nor should it. That's part and parcel of the independence under the charter that the BBC has. But the BBC has a responsibility, certainly in my judgment and other parliamentarians' view, to act responsibly. Now, that means, of course, that they are free to report and free to investigate. But to go back, frankly, over 20 years when things have been quite clearly dismissed as being without foundation, I think is quite wrong. And it sought to present a view. Now, why they did this, you'd have to ask them. But frankly, I detect a sort of anti-India bias in many aspects of what the BBC show. The BBC News is often negative about India as well, and modern India. And I think that's regrettable, because the relations between our two great countries are growing ever stronger, and so they should.
And in the recent past, in fact just last year, we had spoken when there were anti-Hindu violence that took place, most notably in Leicester, where people were targeted not just for their ethnicity but specifically for their religion, and the kind of barely veiled stand the BBC seemed to have taken at that time. Do you think it was a genuine slip-up or it was calculated?
I think there was, though, in Leicester, the real problem was that we've had people that have lived alongside each other for 50 years, be they Hindus, Muslims, or any other religion. And the fact is they lived peacefully alongside each other. Relations were good in Leicester. However, outside forces came in and interfered with that. And all the people that were arrested were from outside Leicester. There were a few people, obviously, that had got involved in the riots, who lived in Leicester, but most were from outside. That wasn't really reported properly, and I think that's regrettable. There was also, frankly, fake news went round, which Leicester police had to get involved
deliberately by the BBC?
Not by the BBC. This, I think, this was put out by in social media. People saying that a mosque had been attacked when clearly it hadn't been, and Leicester police had to put
But a lot of it was amplified by the BBC, Majid Freeman for one.
Well, one of the problems is that, of course, they took this story without foundation, then continued with it. Leicester police then had to put out social media to say this story was not true. And, of course, we now have a position whereby reports are emerging about what really happened and who was behind it. So, that is something that's going to come out over the next few months, I suspect.
Do you think, India and the UK are both very firm on the issue of freedom of speech.
Absolutely.
But given these recent episodes, is there a debate in the UK, as there is in India, about where responsibility and freedom of speech, maybe one needs to relook freedom of speech when there is an underlying agenda?
Well, I think the most important thing is that we should have and encourage freedom of speech. Freedom of speech between politicians, between competing ideas, is absolutely vital, so that people get both sides of a particular argument and can make up their mind. Politicians need to be free to speak their minds and to be challenged on their ideas. The one area I think we have to be very cautious of is when people speak without foundation, and therefore try and make up a story and make it as if it's true. And it might be their idea, it might be their perception, but if it's without evidence, then I'm afraid it can lead to catastrophic consequences. And of course this is what we have to guard against. But at the same time, we've got the opportunities for people to spread quite vile propaganda, and how we deal with that is very difficult. We have to protect children, for example, and one of the concerns we have in the United Kingdom is how young people become radicalised without their parents' knowledge. And when they become radicalised, they can do terrible things. As people are growing up, they tend to take a view that the answer is either yes or no. There's no shades between those two, and they listen to one side of the argument. They don't listen to both sides, and therefore their views can be made up, I'm afraid, in a very detrimental way for their own being and also the safety of the state.
And it's one thing to be radicalized, is the perfect point to get into the next section of our conversation, because it's just been 4 days when we had the review of Prevent, that report being accepted by the UK government. Now, one thing that really stuck out is the fact that it says that not only is there Islamist terror, which is the biggest threat, but that political correctness has stopped people from accepting it.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
I think people are scared to speak out for being accused of being phobic towards one religion or one set of people or other. And it's almost a means of stopping people speaking their minds. And I think this is one of the problems, that that so-called political correctness, woke theory and so on, that we have to cope with. I think it's very, very important that we're in a position to be able to challenge things. And indeed, I think from people from the religious groups and religious leaders, are very important for them to challenge radicalisation and prevent that from happening in its own right. Our Prevent programme was to stop radicalisation of many different types. But obviously it's focused on people from the far right. It's also concentrated on Muslim radicalisation as well. And what we have to remember is we've got a huge Muslim population in the UK. We've got a huge Hindu population in the UK. Very small numbers of those have become radicalised. We've got to counter that and understand how that radicalisation takes place. I don't think that politicians, including myself, understand how this happens and why it happens, because parents don't know it's going on to their children probably until it's too late, because children have access to the internet and to social media, and that enables them to listen to one side of the argument only and not listen to the other side.
But Amnesty has already come out and called this report Islamophobic as well. Their logic is that there is an increasing focus being put on a small minority because now it's politically convenient in the UK.
Well, I think the problem here is that we don't have a proper working definition of so-called Islamophobia. What we should be calling it is anti-Muslim hatred, as opposed to Islamophobia. I think that's very different between the two aspects, and people are scared stiff of being accused of being Islamophobic. It's not about being Islamophobic. It's all about a position of saying, if people are radicalised and they become so radicalised that they commit terrorism, that is a serious threat to the welfare of the state and also the people that live within the state. We cannot allow that to continue to develop. Therefore, we have to counter that. Now, if people then say, by challenging that, you're somehow promoting hatred against a religion, that's not the case. And I think we've got to call it out for what it is, because the Prevent programme and the review of that, unfortunately, in my experience of the Prevent programme, it's far too often it was the same organisations who were getting funding for their activities rather than looking at the nature of the problem. And I think that's where we've got to draw the line and change things.
In your estimation, how bad is the problem of radicalisation in the UK? Because in India, we have had multiple protests. This is a very real debate, as you would have seen. There were protests on the streets. There were calls for beheading. People lost their lives. But any time that this was called out, again, the debate was around whether there's Islamophobia being drummed up. Is the UK also worried about similar radical backlash?
We are worried about radical backlash, and we've just had a couple of incidents in the UK over this last weekend against asylum seekers who are in our hotels, where accusations have been made about some of those asylum seekers may have committed sexual crimes against young girls, and therefore there were violent protests. The concern is that this is all could escalate, and what we've got to do is bear down very, very hard on this type of escalation. Now, when we're talking about radicalisation, we are talking about very small numbers of people, but clearly any centres which promote radicalisation, any centres of learning will have to be closed down. Simple as that. We cannot have a position whereby those centres would be allowed to continue with that sort of activity. We've also got to call out hate preachers from whichever religion and make sure that they are not given access to our young people who can cause, as I've said, immense damage.
Also, increasingly, the Indian diaspora, would you agree, is being more vocal in making the distinction clear between the radical Islamists and non-British people as a whole, that they shouldn't be all lumped together, and in saying that, listen, you have people of a certain religion who are of a large percentage, but a very small part of them are actually involved in any real crime, which is not necessarily the case when it comes to Islamic radicalism. Would you agree with that distinction being made now?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, for far too long in the United Kingdom, the area I represent, Harrow, has people from every country on the world, every religion under the sun, and virtually every language spoken on earth within my area, and we all live happily together. There's always tension, because there always is a bit of tension, but that's not between different communities. So it demonstrates that actually people can live together quite harmoniously. The problem, I think, has been particularly the Indian diaspora have been too quiet, too silent for too long. The whole thing is they are the least likely to be criminals, but the most likely to actually suffer a crime. They have the highest level of education and performance in our schools and going on. They're becoming the leaders of many of our industries and many of our different firms that we provide in our economy. So it demonstrates that they've done really well. At the same time, we have a very large number of people in prison who've committed crimes and been found guilty, obviously, through the judicial process. And the fact is they come from a particular religion. Now, we have to get behind that and say, why is that? And therefore deal with it accordingly.
Now, if we talk about the BBC documentary again, if I was to go back to that for a minute, many people were also wondering about its timing and whether it had anything to do with the UK getting its first openly Hindu Prime Minister. Do you think that's a bit of a...
Well, we're very proud in the Conservative Party that we elected the first female Prime Minister, and we've had 3 of those. And now we've got the first Hindu Prime Minister. And it demonstrates to, I think, our country and to the world that within our party, certainly, it's not about who you are or your background. It's about how good you are to get to the top and to the top position. And Rishi is established himself very quickly. He did a very good job, as we all know, as Chancellor during the pandemic. He's doing an excellent job as Prime Minister and pulling us out of some quite tough, turbulent economic times. So he's done a very good job on that. Now, he's openly Hindu. He celebrates the Hindu religion. That's part and parcel of what he is. And actually, in many ways, the Dharmic view guides his principles as Prime Minister and leader of the United Kingdom. That's great. I think that demonstrates that actually we can, in the United Kingdom, have the opportunity for people of all religions and backgrounds to go on. We've had a position, of course, where we've had several Hindu ministers and Muslim ministers. So we've demonstrated that actually it's not about your religion, it's about your ability. Now, I think that's really positive. Now, in terms of whether the BBC are motivated by that, you'd have to ask them, frankly. I take the view that they shouldn't have shown that particular documentary series or so-called documentary because not only was it badly timed, but it's badly researched and badly performed. And it was deliberately, in my view, done in a way to demonise Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who clearly, as Prime Minister of India, is making an excellent job of running India at a time when we are trying to negotiate that free trade deal. And I think the BBC have questions to answer about why are you doing it then? Just at a crucial time in our history when potentially we have a free trade deal which will be hugely beneficial for both countries and would be excellent news for both economies.
Is there a pushback domestically against Rishi Sunak not just being the first Hindu Prime Minister, but being very open about it? The fact that you said that, his dharmic view is what informs his style of governance. He said it was my dharma to be what I am today. Now, again, like the Prevent report says, political correctness. Maybe it's not perceived as politically correct for a Prime Minister to openly says it was my dharma, to openly be very Hindu in his habits, as it were.
Well, we should have no tolerance of people attacking people because of their values. And clearly, as Prime Minister, Rishi is demonstrating what he believes and what guides him as an individual, and that's to be celebrated, frankly. And it's fundamental values that you want to see in a Prime Minister and you want to see in leaders of a country. The fact they have a particular religion should not be a problem or an issue, nor is it for the United Kingdom. And in many ways, I think if you ask the average UK citizen, they wouldn't be thinking about that. They'd be thinking, frankly, at the moment, about the cost of living, the energy costs, the inflation rate that we've currently got, all the economic issues that we're grappling with, which through his stewardship, I'm sure we're going to deal with, and we will be in a much stronger position as the year goes on, and then people will feel a lot better as a result.
In conclusion, we've covered a gamut of issues, but the one thing that again will play on a lot of people's minds, the BBC of course is autonomous, but it's ultimately state funded. It is financed by the taxpayers of the UK. Can the government then do anything about it to ensure that that kind of misinformation, since you yourself are saying that it was poorly researched, if not overly malified, can the UK government do anything about it?
Well, I mean, I challenged our Foreign Secretary in the House of Commons to give his view. He clearly made very clear that as far as the government was concerned, they disowned the panorama series that was shown on BBC, and that the UK government had a long-term relationship and friendship with India. Now, as far as we're concerned, obviously the BBC is funded by the licence fee. So if you watch any form of broadcasting or listen to any form of broadcasting, you have to have a licence in the United Kingdom. Now, that's up for review. That's something that a lot of us are saying in this day and age, is that the right way of the BBC being financed? And this is not a threat to the BBC, by the way. It's a case of saying, look, is that the right thing to do, given that other broadcasting channels depend on advertising, and we have so many channels now on the various different spectrums. Why is it that the BBC is singled out? And what we've decided at the moment is that BBC and Channel 4, which are both publicly funded, should continue, so there's a bit of competition between those two channels, as well as at the same time the other free-to-air channels and also subscription channels. There is a view to say, should the BBC become a subscription channel, for example, so that viewers would be entitled to actually choose to purchase it or not. That's a valid discussion. What I would say to all the viewers who no doubt are watching back in the UK is, if you are concerned when you see something that you don't like, complain. You've got a right to complain because you're paying the licence fee, and then the BBC has to listen to you. And the more people that complain about their programmes, the more notice they must take of those complaints. Far too often, I have to say, the Indian diaspora in the UK do not complain. They don't complain about any bias or concerns that they have about the content of BBC programmes. They need to complain. They need to end their silence. But I'm afraid that's one of my criticisms of the Indian diaspora in the UK. They just get on with life and don't complain.
Well, for whatever lack of being vocal is there among the diaspora in India, I think the Indian media here more than makes up for it. Thank you very much, Mr. Blackman, as always, for speaking to us. Freedom of speech, of course, is not just about putting out what you want to, but equally of the viewer calling out when they think there is factual inaccuracies, whether unintentional or malified. Here's to much stronger relations and mutual progress of both countries. Thank you very much, Mr. Blackman, for joining us.
My pleasure.
The News Hour at 10 will be right back after the break.
mm एक्स्ट्रा, लंबा व्हील बेस, सेकेंड रो में ज्यादा जगह। यह है कहानी BMW 3GL की। नमस्ते टाइम्स लाइव फैमिली, आई एम क्रांति संभव। वेलकम टू द फर्स्ट ड्राइव रिव्यू ऑफ BMW 3 सीरीज GL यानी ग्रैंड लिमोजीन, जो ऑब्वियसली रेगुलर 3 सीरीज से ज्यादा लंबी है व्हील बेस के हिसाब से। कुछ एक चेंजेस इसमें हुए हैं, तो इस वजह से ये हम वीडियो कर रहे हैं उन चेंजेस के बारे में बताने के लिए, और ये भी जानने के लिए कि जो दावा है कंपनी का सेकेंड रो में ज्यादा आराम का, ज्यादा स्पेस का, वो दावा पूरा हो पा रहा है या नहीं। सो बिफोर आई स्टार्ट टॉकिंग अबाउट दिस कार, सबसे पहले टाइम्स ड्राइव के बारे में आपसे बात करता हूं या अपील करता हूं।
You're watching the News Hour at 10.
Union Home Minister Amit Shah says BJP has no competition for the upcoming general elections next year, and Prime Minister Modi enjoys massive public support. Shah dismisses immediate threat from Khalistanis, however, says that the agencies are maintaining a close watch on such outfits in India and abroad. On the PFI ban, Home Minister says that the government banned the outfit, rising above vote bank politics as PFI promotes radicalism and religious bigotry. As the Adani issue rages on, Home Minister says his government or the party doesn't fear anything as they have nothing to hide on the issue. Opposition continues its attack on central government, says Prime Minister Modi is rattled by Rahul Gandhi's pointed questions on Adani in the parliament.
The News Hour at 10 will be right back after the break.
हमारे साथ मौजूद हैं मोहुल, who is founder and CEO of Matter. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So Mohul, we've already seen this bike. I still don't know what you guys going to call it right now, but hopefully, we're going to know about it in a couple of months, I believe, and more details that we already know about specifications and what you are offering with this bike. But उसके अलावा कुछ और चीज़ें हैं जिनकी डिटेल्स अभी आनी बाकी हैं. So इस बाइक को लेकर थोड़ा टाइमलाइन, इफ यू कैन एक्सप्लेन किस तरह का टाइमलाइन रहने वाला है एंड कब इसका ऑफिशियली लॉन्च आप करने वाले हैं.
Definitely. So first thing is at the Auto Expo we have also showcased the 6 kilowatt version of the bike. So at launch we had a 5 kilowatt version. Now we also have a 6 kilowatt version of the bike. And in terms of time,
you're watching the News Hour at 10.